The last guest writes the first question. So I will leave it to you because it's a mystery to both of us.
All right. What are some key behavioral attributes that you feel led to a successful transition in the past? It's a great question. Grit, determination, willpower, just there isn't any quit. You can't. When you've got people depending on you, sometimes that's people that are going to be future in your life, or in your life in the future. Even if you're single and you're making a transition from mom and dad's house into, possibly the military or college or the trades or whatever, and regardless of where that leads you in life, many people that did your career, that did my career, didn't start at 18. Some of them went to college. I did. But some of them started in the trades. I
started at 18. I'm one of those goofballs who spent damn near my entire adult life in law enforcement.
That's awesome. My oldest son is just turned 22, and he got hired at 21 for a small town police department up just outside of Boise. Super proud of him.
Very cool.
Feel like I completely failed because I was a career fire, and we have that love-hate, I respect the holy heck out of our guys that we work shoulder to shoulder with. We were on the same calls a lot of the times. Boots on the ground guys, I can't recall a single time where we had issues on scene. I heard of them. The issues between us were largely up at the brass level, trying to see who had more collar jewelry. But anyway, I'm super proud of him. But my wife tells me that even when he was a little kid, his favorite superhero was Batman. And when you think about what is he, he's a vigilante cop. He's got gadgets on his belt, and he's always about doing justice and doing the right thing. And so it fits his personality, and I couldn't be more proud of him.
It's said in jokingly, and I do believe this, though, that the majority of cops, if you gave them the opportunity to go back and redo their career, they'd be firemen.
Well, we kidding aside, and there's some fun jokes that, what do they have in common? We both took the fireman test. But I think a lot of that is driven by public image. In the last, couple of decades, unfortunately, I think the law enforcement officers have been vilified. I mean, look what happened in the last 5 years. It's been ramped up with the whole defund the police thing. And regardless of what side of the politics you're on, from a slightly outsider's perspective, but I can kind of see behind the curtain. It looks an awful lot like the stories of how the soldiers that came back from Vietnam were treated. A lot of those guys went there not of their own volition. They were drafted. They were sent to do a job that was an unpleasant job. Hindsight, I think just about everybody recognizes that was at least not done well, and you could make large cases that we shouldn't have even been involved. So, I don't want to try to rehash that or die. I'm not trying to make an argument one way or another on that. But when I see, my best friend is a sheriff's deputy up in Spokane County, and hearing what he's been through and what he goes through on a daily basis, so the LEO community, they're getting the dirty end of the stick these last few years, and good gosh, it seems like almost everybody loves the fire department. We show up and everybody loves us because supposedly things start getting better when we arrive. Most people aren't happy to see, when they need the police, they're typically not happy to see the police arrive. Or when a situation requires police, they're not happy to see the police arrive because they've been either assaulted or they got pulled over or something along those lines. Maybe something crummy's happened. Their house is on fire. Their parents having a heart attack or something like that. But when we arrive, we don't bring consequences.
No, for the most part, you make things better.
Yeah, for the most part. Sure. So
you bring up a great analogy, and I've had conversations with cops who were cops during the late 60s, early 70s. And they're saying that this anti-establishment, this anti-respect for authority, this all cops are bad,
right,
is just a repeat of that. And they've even told me, they go, that was worse in the 60s and the late 60s, early 70s, especially that Vietnam era. It carried over into society too, from what the cops were seeing.
I believe it.
So where I'm going with this is it's cyclical.
Yeah.
We'll come out of it. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
The other Vietnam analogy, though, that I use is body-worn cameras.
Yeah.
They've become much more prevalent today.
Yeah.
But it's the exact same thing. If you think about it, the Vietnam War was a turning point because that was the first war where you turned on the news at 6 o'clock and while you were eating dinner, you were seeing real life footage of what combat was like.
Press embedded with the troops. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, people started going, wait a minute, and they got a behind the curtain look at what war was really like.
Right.
And where a lot of that, I'll call it animosity towards the government machine, the military machine, because I think for so many generations before that, there was kind of a blind trust maybe in the government. Hey, we send our young boys off to go fight a war. The war's for the right reason.
Yeah.
We have no idea what actually happens. Guys come back and they're shell shocked.
Right.
But now the average person got to see what was going on.
Sure.
Same way with body-worn camera. Right. I tell people all the time, I don't care all the training in the world. If somebody doesn't want to go to jail, there's no way you're going to make it look pretty on camera. It's not going to.
100%.
So do they need more training? 100%.
Absolutely.
Do they need more resources? 100%. But at the end of the day, somebody who does not want to go to jail, they're not going to make it look pretty on camera.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm really glad you brought that up because, I've had this conversation with a couple of people. People talk about budgets for police department, for fire department, and we each have our own nuances. And so I'm a big proponent. You need to take the police budget and you need to multiply it by 300%. And people go, well, what are you talking about? We gave them 5% more or less. No. Because when you look at I'm not going to have hard numbers on this because I haven't studied this, right? But your tier one operators in the military, how much time as a percentage do they spend training? They're on duty, they're in uniform, they're being paid. How much time do they get to spend training? An enormous percentage. What I think would be a whole lot better, but then they're held to a very, very, very high standard, and they produce at a very high standard. But when your local police department gives each cop a box of 50 rounds of ammunition and says, go to the range once a month, all you're doing is building training scars. You're in a sterile environment in that indoor range. Now, if you can go to a dynamic range, a tactical range, okay, great. But 50 rounds a month? No, that's not enough. You need to, if you want to hold these people, and I support, I think most people that do it want to do it to a very high level, but you've got to equip them to do that. And that's going to be, hey, you need to have at least 20% of your on-duty time training, minimum. Now, sometimes that training is going to be sitting at a desk watching or listening to a presentation of the new policies. Okay, that's part of it. But some of that is going to be tactics. It might be in the gym doing mat work, doing hands-on training that, whether it's jiu-jitsu or Aikido or some sort of manipulative skill. Some of it might be, tactical use of various weapon systems. And during that minimum 20% of their paid on-duty time, they're not listening to the radio because they could get sent on a call. No. They need to be able to treat that training environment as if that's the call. So 100% of their mental bandwidth is devoted to what do I need to learn? What do I need to do? And training is the time to make the mistakes. Make them there so that you work through those and your team works through it. And then, but in order to do that, at that level, because you've got to have a minimum staffing to staff your whatever service you're offering, be it law enforcement or fire protection. You can't take from that minimum staffing without compromising the safety of the citizens. And there's taxpayers and their tax dollars are supporting the efforts. So respect it. But hey, citizens, it wouldn't be that much more in your taxes to fund that kind of increase in that particular department. Does the water department need 300% increase? Probably not. But your LEO guys and gals, your fire guys and gals, they could sure use that additional training towards the tail end of my time with my fire department, they were taking 25% of the entire department out of service without backfill on the weekends to take them down to the training facility and go beat the living snot out of these guys for a day or a half a day worth of service. And then they're chomping at you on the bit saying, hey, you got to get back in service. It's like, we just wore ourselves out on this training exercise. Let us go back, get some chow, get a clean uniform. Let's make sure that our equipment's ready to respond because we just beat it up. And then let us get back into service. I'm not saying pay us to go take a nap, but let us get kind of refreshed and replenished, get some rehydration so that we're ready. Because what you don't know is when the next call that comes in, whether it's for your side or my side of the aisle, for better term, you don't know if that call is going to be a 14-hour 5-alarm fire. You don't know if that's going to be a massive tactical standoff. You have no idea what's that next event that's going to be happening. You don't know if it's going to be an MCI, and all of us are going to be there. Mass casualty incident for people that don't know. You've got to protect your resources. You got to respect your resources. And when you take care of your people, when you respect them in that regard, they'll bend over backwards for you. We entered a life of service for a reason.
There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle to unpack in what you said. You use you started the analogy with tier 1 operators.
Sure.
And when you look at the military, that's a very small component of the total military.
Absolutely.
They raise their hand, hey, I want to be part of that team.
Yep.
And they achieve a higher standard than the average person who just, and I don't ever want to make it sound this way, but who just signed their name on the line to say, I'm going to serve my country.
Sure.
The same way from the law enforcement side of the house. You have regular patrol people, you have SWAT teams.
Sure.
SWAT teams hold a higher standard. There's more training involved.
100%.
I would love to get more training across the board. Where I'm going with this is there are some people, though, that they don't look at their career that way.
That's okay.
It's just a job.
Sure.
They don't want to do the extra.
And I believe all the careers that we're discussing, all those vocations, we need those people. We need the person that says, all I want to be is a jet mechanic. All I want to be is I want to fix tanks. They need them. All I want to do, okay. We need those people. The people in our respective careers that might be behind the scenes at the fire marshal's office or processing paper. We need those people. They're an integral part of it. And I'm not trying to, just to be clear, I'm not trying to minimize their contribution. Now, you're 100% right that in those higher teams, they volunteered, they fought. I tested with between 3,500 people and 4,000 people for 20 spots when I got hired.
Oh, that was how it was when I got it back in the 90s.
So, right.
To get in the door, there were a lot more people who wanted to do it.
It was very competitive, and you had to demonstrate that you were in the upper echelon of the candidates. So
within the fire world, though,
yeah.
You make it through the fire academy. You're part of a firehouse. You're running on a truck.
Yep.
What would be the tier 1 or the SWAT element within a fire service?
Probably your technical rescue groups, and every department is going to handle this in their own way. I worked for the City of Seattle Fire Department. Our technical rescue group, when I was hired, they were called Ladder 7. Towards the tail end of my career, which ended in November of 2021, they were really trying to change the vernacular or the common tongue and be called Rescue 1. Now, they were Ladder 7 / Rescue 1 and Rescue 1. Now, I will absolutely stand on the mountaintops and talk about how awesome those guys and the skills that group of people had. One of their dubious, maybe not dubious, but one of their claims to fame, I hold them in very high regard for this. They were the rescue team that went the deepest into the rubble piles at 9/11 after that event, looking for survivors and looking for victims and remains, because of their skill set. They had it. They were awesome. So very, very proud to be even rubbing shoulders with those people, because sometimes they'd rotate out into the companies and hey, we got this guy with us today. Look what we can learn. What can you teach us? Right.
But now the flip side to that, within the entirety of the Seattle Fire Department, did you ever hear, maybe under somebody's breath, kind of grumbling, "Oh, those prima donnas. Oh, look at all
absolutely.
the."
Oh, absolutely.
But everybody who says that has the opportunity to try out for that team.
100%.
You meet the standards. Guess what? You get on the team.
Yep. Yeah. Now, the way our department worked, you had to have a vacancy, but there was always
correct.
Yeah. But when yes, you're right. 100%.
So like you talked about, you tested one of 5,000 to get in the door. Now when you want to move up to that advanced team, you're going to be testing again at an even higher level.
Testing at a higher level, you're going to go through the interview process, and then once you get there, there's a kind of like a probationary period where you've got to get certain skills checked off, demonstrated, and I think it's a 16-week thing, and you've got to get that, and then you also have to get sent to dive school. Now, they send you out to an outside dive school, so even if you get your 16 shifts marked off, they can't just say, hey, start dive school for Bob this day. They have to wait for a school to start that out of that third-party school, and hypothetical Bob has to complete the dive school. And once they've done both of those, then they get signed off, and you are now officially part of that group. So
now working my way all the way back to what you said in the beginning, the positive side of it.
Yeah.
You could go back to using the military as an example, go back to the start of GWAT and look at the average troop and their equipment and their training and look at them today. Look at everything that was part and parcel to a tier 1 team that has bled down into average teams.
Oh, yeah.
Same way in law enforcement. Yep. I look back at how I was taught to clear a building back in 1992. And I look at how the young men and women are taught today, just at the academy level. You don't need to be on SWAT, and you're getting high risk training and weapons manipulation. So it all bleeds down. But as you know, with our organizations, it's like turning an aircraft carrier. It does not turn sharp.
No.
And so you have to make these small incremental changes. Yeah. I believe if we keep pushing this rock forward, you're going to look back or jump ahead 25, 30 years from now. And that may seem like a long time, but it's really not.
No, it'll go fast.
And you'll look at the men and women and the level of training and the way that they're doing it, and it's going to progress and it's going to get better.
Yeah.
The one thing, and you hit on this, that we will always fight in the sense of, for the most part, when you're on your shift, there's not much you could do in a proactive way to stop a fire from happening, per se.
Yeah.
Just driving around in a fire truck, not necessarily will prevent a fire. No. Will prevent somebody from having a heart attack, something like that. The patrol function, though, of law enforcement will always be that unmeasurable deterrent.
Yep.
And so, yes, in a perfect world, it would be like a firehouse. Hey, half the shift is completely off the road today. It's training.
Yeah.
We'll deal with it if a call comes in.
Right.
You don't have that luxury in law enforcement.
Right.
So I think that will always be
absolutely
the tipping point in the difference between the two of them. But they'll eventually figure it all out.
Yeah.
They will.
Okay.
They will. If you talk to somebody who is doing firefighting, just basic firefighting in 1970, you'd look at them and go, there's no freaking way I'm going to go into a burning building with that training or that equipment.
Right.
Things change.
Absolutely.
You adapt.
Right.
100%. Will it be different 30 years from now?
Yeah.
Kids will go, you were fighting fires in the 2000s? Man, this is what we do now.
Right.
It's all going to be different.
Sure.
So I'm trying to stay positive.
Yes.
Let's go back to you, though, more personally.
Sure.
Talk to me. Where's hometown? Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
Okay. I was born in a suburb of Seattle called Bellevue. My parents very quickly moved from Bellevue to a little town called Issaquah. When they moved there, it had one 4-way stop sign. Now it is massive. It is huge. It's
all the tech industries.
Industries. Costco headquarters is there. Everybody knows who Costco is.
Those old farts still call it Price Club.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's where we were raised. My parents, I was raised in a conservative Christian home.
Big family, small family?
Small family. Mom, dad, I have one younger sister. She's 3 years younger. She currently works for a big tech company in Seattle. So yeah, she's doing well and she's working her way up there.
What did mom and dad do for work?
Mom was a insurance adjuster. She was actually the primary breadwinner for our home. Dad was a small contractor. They got started. I'll back up for 30 seconds of background. My parents were born and raised in the Chicago area.
If you go 31, I'm going to cut you off, just so you know.
Okay. In the early 70s, for a number of reasons, they decided they didn't want to live in the Chicago area anymore, so they uprooted before I was born, moved out to the Bellevue area, and Dad bought a Service Master franchise, the carpet cleaning company. And that grew a little bit, and then Dad had an injury, which put him out of work for a while. My mom had the college degree, so she went to work for an insurance company as an insurance adjuster. And as Dad healed up a little bit, he went back into, separated from the Service Master franchise and opened up a small remodel and fire and disaster restoration company. But he didn't have employees. I was his only employee.
Was that what he did in Chicago?
No, in Chicago, he was as an adult, for a couple of years, he was with the Secretary of State Police. It's my understanding that was similar to like a state patrol.
Maybe like the Attorney General's office?
I think he worked for the licensing department.
Okay. In a sworn capacity, though?
A sworn capacity, yeah. Interesting stories about the cars that they had back in those days with those great big, the big engines. Yeah, the big blocks. And, but yeah, so he's sworn capacity. And after a couple of years there, he felt that environment was not something he wanted to be a part of anymore. So he left. And then fast forward, they get out to Washington. A couple of kids come along, my sister and myself. And mom's the main breadwinner as the insurance adjuster. Dad is doing what he can as a small contractor. Started taking me to work with him when I was about 5.
Did he ever look at law enforcement in Washington?
I think he did a little bit of like reserve officer stuff for a little bit, but I never really talked to him asked him too much about that. I probably should have, but I didn't. So by the time I was 7 and 8, I was framing walls. They were, I started with just sweeping and cleaning up, but they were square, plumb, the right size. They were where they needed to be. I couldn't build them as fast as he could, but I could build them. By the time I was 12, I was setting tile and sweating pipes, which turned out to be a blessing for what was going to happen down the road. Mom stayed with the insurance adjuster path. She moved companies a couple of different times. I got done with was sent to grammar school at Bellevue Christian School, and then finished up at a public high school the last 3 years.
How was that transition for you?
It was different. I was very socially awkward because I was working with Dad every day that I wasn't at school. Vacations weren't a vacation for me. I'm going to work. Even after school, there were some days Dad would pull me out of school to go to a job site with him. At 10 or 12, I could have a conversation with an adult, but I couldn't figure out how to talk to a girl until I was 24. I mean, I was very, very socially awkward. High school was horribly unpleasant for me. I hated it. College was a different world, mostly because everybody who was a big fish in a little pond at high school shows up in college, and all of a sudden now everybody's a basic boogerhead all over again, and so they're back to my social level, or
you almost kind of leveled up.
Yeah, I kind of leveled up because I was like, okay, cool. And so my college experience was fantastic. I loved that. I played a lot of hockey. I got a pretty cool degree, but my dream was to be a fireman.
As far as your childhood, though,
yes.
you talk about like there were no vacations. Vacation was working with your dad type of deal.
Absolutely.
Did you get the opportunity to be a kid? Did you play sports growing up?
Good question. I did get, my dad wanted what he thought was the All-American son. He wanted the guy that was going to be the quarterback of the football team that was going to, go to bed with the prom queen. And I didn't and couldn't do that for him. I did play football. Academics came very easy for me, and they came easy for me early. So I was put in very early. I was 16 my senior year of high school in the beginning. So when football starts in August in Washington, I'm 16 and I'm competing for positions with my school peers on the football team that are 2 years older than me, my senior year.
So you said you did your last 3 years in public school.
In public school, correct. But
you were already ahead of grade at that point?
Yes. Yeah, I got put in kindergarten very, very early.
Got it.
They brought me down and had me do some cognitive tests and so forth. And I'm like, oh yeah, he's totally ready for school. Like, okay. So, and again, academics were really not a problem for me. I got really good grades. Even though I didn't have much time to spend studying, I was doing a lot of working. I was doing 40 hours a week, some weeks even during football season, working for Dad, because I'd go to school, I'd go to football practice, and then I'd go to his shop. By that age, in the late 80s, Dad purchased a RV repair business. So he actually had a shop that he went to rather than going to people's homes and working in their homes. And what that allowed is we could work at any hour because it was his shop. He had the keys. So, and then come summertime, because it was the RV business, your busy season is 2 weeks before Memorial Day and 2 weeks after. You're basically through hunting season. And so it's all hands on deck. And so that's kind of how that worked. Did a lot of work, learned how to do a lot of things. The RVs were an interesting transition because you had 12-volt electrical systems. You had 110 electrical systems. You had, if it was in a motorhome, you had all of the components and systems of the vehicle, the engine, the fuel system, and all of that kind of stuff. And then you had the house portion of it, which was built like a 2x2s and aluminum skin and paneling on the inside. And then you had the propane system, and you had the water systems, drain system, and everything all kind of mixed together. And so you really had to be able to how are all these, the wastewater system doesn't really connect to the carburetor, but it all has to work for that motorhome to go down the road and work for the clients. So there was a lot of dynamic thinking that had to go on when you're approaching working and repairing and maintaining those kinds of vehicles.
With I'll call it forced labor.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a point where you kind of rebelled and kind of pushed back against all of it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it really was forced labor. And I want to be really careful about this. I'm a big believer that, hey, if you have a family business, that's the family business. And I think that the parents have a prerogative to say, no, you're working in the family business. But the problem that came was there was an integrity gap. And that was, hey, I'm paying you. Okay, so I'm keeping track of my hours at an agreed rate. And then it's like, okay, Dad, here you go. Oh, no, I'm not paying you. Wait, but you said, no, I'm not going to pay. Well, I'm going to pay for your college. Now, in mid-late 80s, my dad did receive an inheritance from his mother when she passed. And, I can remember Dad sitting at the kitchen counter, just tears going down his street. I can finally afford to send my kids to college. And so my sister and I are thinking that, Dad's committing to, you're going to go to college and this is what you're going to pay for. Now, I believe a parent has the prerogative to say, no, we're not going to, if you're going to go to college, that's fine, but we're not going to pay for it. That's up to I believe the parents have the autonomy in that decision, and they should. But I do think that what you can't do as a parent is you can't tell them one thing and then give them something else. And you can't say, we're gonna, and then say, no, we're not.
Well, just basic life lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there was a lot of integrity gaps in that aspect of it. And so,
you mentioned already that you knew you wanted to be a firefighter. Yeah. The idea to go to college, was that pushed on you by your parents?
Very much so. It was just what you did. Dad didn't complete college. Mom did. And what we saw was that Mom was able to go use that college degree and had nothing to do with insurance. That was still in the early 80s, where a college degree was an entrance ticket to the middle class. And so for that generation and the one before that, they and maybe even the two before that, that's really what a college degree represented. And back then, the college prices hadn't gone through the roof like they have now. Even in 92 to 96, when I was attending college, it wasn't that exorbitant. I mean, I got out of college with $11,000 in student loans, but I also worked a bunch while I was in college to help minimize and cover my costs. Now, to be truthful and fair, mom and dad paid for the first year. They helped a little bit with the second, but I was 100% on my own for the third and fourth. And so, yeah.
What'd you go into study?
I got a degree in vehicle research and design from Western, which at the time was rated one of the top 3 schools on the planet for it. So we would go design and build competitions with sponsored by automotive manufacturers or other people in that kind of an industry. Like here, there's going to be this competition. This is the rules of the competition. The competition is 2 years from now because you have to design and build a car or a vehicle of some kind. And there was lots of other stuff. I know they put 2 cars on the cover of Popular Science. And we used to go into competitions and beat the snot out of MIT.
Was there any forethought on your part that if firefighting doesn't happen, I'll fall back on this? Or was it merely, I'm going to get a degree in something that's interesting to me?
A little bit of both. I wanted a degree that was something that was interesting, but funny, I hadn't thought about it until you just now when you brought it up. Well, I thought about it a lot, but not for the purpose of this conversation. My mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1986. And so I watched my mom go from a lady who competed on the balance beam in college at the collegiate level to almost being in a wheelchair. And now her symptoms got a little bit better, or when she was first diagnosed, it was a massive crash of symptoms. So she was bedridden and it was a mess. And she got herself better, a lot better, but MS is very varied in how the symptoms present with different people, and some of the current medications weren't available then. But I still saw that, hey, even with a debilitating disease or condition, she was still able to be the main breadwinner for our family. That's how we had health insurance. That's how we had dental insurance. That's how bills got paid and so forth and whatnot. Dad was a terrific craftsman, but he was a terrible businessman. So, he might do real well.
Aren't most artists like that, though?
I could be.
You always hear about the people who their creative ability is off the chain.
Right.
But they try to run a business and they can't put 2 and 2 together.
Right. Yeah. And again, terrific craftsman. I learned a lot of my skills from him and very high standards and which was great. Again, it served as a amazing cushion when the event happened. And so I wanted a college degree because I went, hey, look, if I end up in a snow skiing accident and I'm in a wheelchair, I can at least fall back on my college degree and I can provide for my family. I can't be a fireman anymore, but I can do this. And at the end of my college time, mom wanted me to go into her industry. Dad wanted me to go into his industry. I interviewed for a couple of different companies. I was blessed to be offered a job at one of them. And I took it. It was in a contracting world, doing for a decent sized contractor in Seattle as a project manager. And then about 3 months after I graduated, my dad had another really bad accident, and almost died. And I chose to stop what I was doing and my employment and return to see if I could save my dad's company. And I felt I had an obligation. I was the oldest son, the only son, oldest child, and I was the only one who I felt could run that company.
Was he running it by himself at that point in time?
Yeah, he was. Mom and Dad had gotten divorced. Mom divorced Dad in a few years prior, and he didn't take that well. But anyway, they're both gone now. It was a very unhealthy example of a marriage. In a lot of ways. A lot of it was my father's behavior. He was a manipulator and a user of people. And early on, this kind of plays into a little bit of my social awkwardness. Early on, I recognized that my dad is a manipulator and a user of people. I recognized that wasn't the way to be. But I didn't have examples in my life of somebody I could turn to and say, okay, I know I don't want to do that, but I'm looking for a mentor that I can say that this is what I want to be like. And I eventually found that person, but it took a few years. So yeah, that's just kind of how that morphed. When dad had his wreck, I quit that job that I had, went and tried to save his company. And at that time, he hadn't completed any will or living will from the divorce. He was still kind of upset about that. So we just did the whole, well, we got to do it legal. So he was unconscious in a medically induced coma for his recovery. I was like, well, I got to keep his business going. So I went back and I started fixing on the RVs, and I assessed which jobs could actually be profitable and which couldn't. And the ones that couldn't, that hadn't been started, I called up the customers and said, I'm sorry, we can't do it. It's just not a profitable job. You're not going to want to pay us $4,000 to repair an RV that's worth $1,000 when it's repaired. And I'm not going to do it for $1,000. I can't. That's sort of an example, right?
Your body is built for more energy, more focus, more strength. But if you're feeling sluggish, unmotivated, or mentally drained, it's time to make a change. At Human Performance TRT, science meets convenience. Their hormone replacement therapy, weight loss programs, and mental health solutions are all designed to help you feel and perform at your best without ever leaving home. They offer medical-grade hormone optimization, weight loss support with personalized health coaching, and ketamine therapy for depression, anxiety, and trauma, all guided by qualified mental health professionals. HPTRT is veteran and first responder owned, and they make it simple to optimize your health. There's no locked-in contracts, and if you're already on a hormone program, switching is easy. There's no extra test if your blood work is under 6 months old. Ready to take back your edge? Go to hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off. That's hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off your entire program. Stop waiting. Your peak performance starts now.
At that time, he had a couple of part-time employees. I laid them off, gave him a nice glowing letter of recommendation so they could, reference, hey, have them call me. I'll give you a good recommendation, whatever we need.
At that time, were you thinking that I want to try to rehab this business and keep it going? Or was it merely, I just need to button up all of the loose ends and then step away from it?
I was going to try to get it. We didn't know how bad he was going to be when he recovered. We had no idea where he was going to be at.
So more like just keep it going until he's back, and then he can decide what he wants to do with his business.
I did not have an intention of staying with it and running it. I was trying to preserve it so he had something to come back to. He ended up being blinded in the accident completely. The optic nerve died, so there was no real. The doctors told us the optic nerve doesn't regenerate. So it was like, no, he's blind for life, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that started a whole nother thing. But at that point, at that juncture, it was like, okay, fine. Because we were seeking guardianship so that we could make business decisions to help run his company, courts got involved, which just made a giant mess of everything. And, but it's funny. Everything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And going through that adversity, when he did come out of his coma, and was working his way through his rehab facility and so forth, he decided he wanted to sue me. And as a 22-year-old,
it's always the best way to say thanks to a child.
Unsuccessfully. I wish to add, because if he was successful, that means I was the giant colossal mess up. But I was like, okay, fine. So that really damaged our relationship. And it was right about that time, the courts made some rulings and so forth. So it was like, okay, fine, I'm getting out. Handed it over to one of his colleagues who wanted to be his guardian, and he was cool with that. So it's like, fine, go. And I went on to go live my life. I ended up getting hired. Boeing was at the tail end of a hiring cycle. Here I was, like, no job, trying to figure out. I just sacrificed everything that I had sort of pieced together to try to help him, and I had basically got the reset button pushed. So, and again, adversity makes you stronger. If it doesn't kill you, and little did I know that those lessons, that the resilience that I learned in that window, that was a very, very dark time for me. But in that, the resilience that I had to learn and push through was going to help me later in life a lot. And that was just the first round. So then we go to, I get hired at Boeing in their engineering department. And full disclosure, I was not a good employee. I was not. I was good at what they used me for, but I was not good at what they hired me for. I managed when they were right at the tail end, because Boeing has always been cyclical with their hiring. They hire for a bunch, and then they status quo for about a year or two, and then they start laying off a bunch, and then at the bottom, so it's just this, and it's just all this big cycle. I was hired at the tail end of a hiring spree, and I managed to survive, I think, the first 3 rounds of layoffs. I had found a niche where I had value, but then I ended up getting my pink slip, and went to work for a dear friend, and as an auto mechanic, just temporarily. And as soon as I started with Boeing, that's when I said, no, I need to get back to living my life, not selfishly, but I need to live my life for my goals and my dreams, not for my parents or anybody else's. And so that's when I also started saying, no, you know what? I wanted to be a fireman. I'm going to go do that. So the Boeing job I always looked at as a temporary anyway.
Why hadn't you just gone down that path earlier?
I tried to go down that path when I was in college, and I never lived in a neighborhood where I could volunteer or do any of it. And I didn't choose to, try to test while I was still going to college. I wanted to complete that task. I didn't want to go, hey, I got 2 years on and then I got hired. Because again, the college was also kind of my backup plan. Remember, if I had gotten hurt or something, I didn't know how that was really. And I was the first person in my family to go into the fire service, so I had no idea what that culture was going to be like. I had no idea what it was like being a civil servant. I had no idea what the details and nuances come with doing that type of a career.
Where did the original desire to be a fireman come from?
I never grew out of wanting to drive the big red truck. It's just that silly and stupid. Everybody loves your fireman. We talked earlier, touched earlier on my development in athletics. I'm tall because my mom and dad were tall. My grandfather was tall. Apparently, I'm a spitting image of my granddad. You look at pictures of him at the same age, and it's like you almost can't tell us apart. But I was uncoordinated. I was 2 left feet. I was slow, weak, pudgy. All of those things that was just a recipe. Just slow to physically develop, except my height. So I was big. I was always, even though I was the youngest kid in my class, all the way through all of my classes, I was like the tallest or second tallest in my class the whole time.
You mentioned playing hockey in college. Yes. Did it eventually click for you?
Oh, yes. It very much did click. The summer after I graduated high school, it clicked, and it clicked in a major way. My fastest 40 time in high school was 5.4. Magma moves faster than that. I just couldn't pick him up and put him down. I'm goofing around playing dorm intramural soccer at college, and I run a guy down from behind who goes, "Where'd you come from?" And I go, "Back there." He goes, "Nobody catches me from behind." And to me, it wasn't a big deal. He goes, "I run a 4.3. Nobody catches me." Well, I did. Deal with it. We were friends. It was one of those aha kind of moments. And all of a sudden, everything was just clicking. And so
you're the epitome of a late bloomer.
Yes, yeah. And I always wanted to play hockey, but we couldn't afford it. We didn't live close enough. It wasn't, and Dad couldn't coach it. That was part of the other thing is any sport I played, Dad had to coach. And if you're the coach's kid, if you've ever been a coach's kid, that's a different world. Most of the time, the coach's kids have to work way harder than everybody else on the team because they have to overcome the dad doesn't want to show favoritism, so they're harder on their own kid most of the time, at least what I've observed.
I was going to say, I don't know if most parents would agree with that today.
Okay, maybe not. and that's
my limited experience, especially with the explosion of travel ball.
Yeah.
Your kid wasn't selected for this team. Well, here's what we'll do. We'll go start our own travel team.
Right.
So I can guarantee my kid starts.
That's, and I've seen that too. So, but yeah, so I put skates on for the first time when I was in college, and 2 years later, I was playing for the college team. Now, I was not a star. I want to be very, very clear for that. I was a third liner, and I'd get garbage time. What I would get is I'd get a time to spell our studs so that they could catch a breather. But what I had endurance and I had grit, and I'd go into at that time, I was 170 pounds at my same height. So I was a Q-tip. But I'd go into the corners and fight for the pucks with their 240-pound defensemen, with the other team's 200, and just get destroyed. But I had a lot of assists because I could dig that puck out, take the pounding, and dish it out to our guys who are also, and feed them, and then to me, that was the epitome of a team player. It's we before me. I don't need the stats.
Right.
So yeah. I miss hockey. I miss competing. I miss it very much. But when the fire department became when I started getting closer to getting hired with that, I had to hang them up because I couldn't risk getting hurt off duty. We didn't have our healthcare plan didn't cover off duty injuries or time for off duty.
The fire department have its own hockey team?
They did later on, and it was kind of funny. I get this phone call and, hey, heard you played hockey in college. I go, who'd you hear that from? I haven't told anybody that. Well, we know. So we're putting together a team. Okay, I'll come out. It's no check. Yeah, right. Who are we playing? We're going to play the Seattle Police team. We're going to play them. There's a major junior team that was out of Seattle. Now they're still called the Seattle Thunderbirds. But we were going to be the last game. Almost like you look at like a fight card, you got fights leading up to it. Well, they'd start with the ankle biters at 3, and then different teams would have little scrimmage games up until right before they had to clean the ice twice for the big guys, the major juniors, right? Well, we were the last team, so fans are starting to come into the stadium, and it was a charity thing, and they said, I said, who are we playing? We're going to play the Seattle Cop team. We're going to play the Seattle Bullets, who's been playing together for 13 years. Yeah, we're going to get killed. No. Firemen we always kill them with all. We're way more athletic. I said, you don't understand. This is hockey. I can pass faster than anybody can skate. No, we're going to get killed. We got killed. We got destroyed. We got destroyed. We got embarrassed. But it was fun. Yeah.
So let's go back to heading down that journey. Before you selected any agency to test with,
yes,
did you do any type of background research to learn anything about what being a firefighter would entail more than driving the big red truck?
No.
Good.
No, I didn't. I really didn't. I had an idea that they worked long days on, long days off.
Did you know any firefighters?
I knew a couple. There was a guy he had a storage unit and he was kind of restoring a Mustang. He was a firefighter and it was near where my dad's RV shop was, and we got to know him because he'd come down and borrow tools and stuff like that. But
did you tell your parents that you wanted to be a fireman before you even went into college?
Yep.
And what was their take on it?
Okay. And as parents, as it became more real, it's like, no, it's dangerous, so we don't want you to go do that. Okay. I mean, as a parent, you don't want your kids going into harm's way. I mean, we're both parents, right? I mean, you don't want, go do that really, really dangerous career. It's not as dangerous as the movies make it look out to be. But I've also had 15 surgeries. I am the $6 million man. The majority of those surgeries were related from injuries sustained in my almost 22-year career. And I've had a number of injuries that didn't result in surgery well beyond those surgeries. So
the only unfortunate thing, though, is they're not dangerous until they are. And then 100%. Unfortunately, you don't usually get a big, I'll call it a big red warning sign that
the roof's going to collapse and you're going to fall in. Yeah.
So I've used the analogy of it's easy to say, I would die for this country because I love this country.
Sure.
It's another thing to say, I'll send my child to go die for this country.
100%.
So when 100%. you become a parent, what your kids want to do, all of a sudden you're like, man, I got to let them live their own lives, but I don't want them doing that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And
how many agencies did you look at?
I tested for every agency in probably a dozen. Now, I actually haven't counted, so I'm kind of guessing off the hip, and that was a long time ago. I tested for every agency that would let me test in Washington. Now, at that juncture, I was testing starting in 97 through the 99-year testing cycle. So that's 3 years of testing, 97, 98, 99. And see just how it worked. Seattle happened to be the first one because they were the first one to take the test, or that ran the test the first of the calendar year. I signed up for it, showed up. And again, I was blessed that academics were easy. I don't get test anxiety. I took those tests really well. I probably did better than my actual intelligence would compare. I just take those tests well. I actually took the ASVAB test after my freshman year of college. We had a local recruiter that had some RV work done, and we were doing it for him. And he's like, "Hey, you should do the reserves so you can make money for college," because that was kind of on my mind that summer. It's like, And so I'm getting off track a little bit, but I took that test, and he comes back in the shop driving his old jalopy truck on two wheels. He's coming around the corner waving papers out the window. And when the results of the test, he goes, "We're not taking you in the reserves. We're sending you to Annapolis." I go, "No, Ken, I'm not. We've been down this road. I do not." And it's funny because if you hear me say it now, just limited to that, you think that I've got not serving our country in the military is one of my biggest regrets. At the time, I was my youth, my inexperience, my awkwardness. I didn't want to do it. I thought I'm embarrassed to say it, but I thought that I was above it. In hindsight, no. One of my biggest regrets. I'm so thankful for all of the men and women that do serve our nation in that capacity. So yeah.
I've heard a couple veterans explain it that way, and we need to do a better job of marketing it better. Unfortunately, it gets marketed to a segment of society who thinks that they have no other option. Yeah. And that's the fallback, where it's actually an opportunity to do so much and give you so much opportunity with your life.
There was a gentleman that you had on your show, at least a few interviews that you posted ago, that I took. My big takeaway from your conversation with him was how many opportunities are often overlooked by people that are serving while you're active duty, while you're reserve, and then once you get out. And he was talking specifically about teaching his daughter where and how to exercise, not in a anything other than a noble, and they're there. You're not gaming the system. You're just simply taking advantage of what's available. And I thought that was really interesting that he had that perspective on that. So
I say it all the time, and anybody who's got the opportunity, all of these careers offer you great opportunities.
Yeah.
Take them.
Yes.
Use them to their fullest extent. Right. And I say this because these aren't careers that you per se ride until you're 65, 70.
Sure.
They are short-term careers. Get the most out of them for what you're giving them.
Absolutely. Totally. It'd be nice if there were more people that were willing to share all of the little nuances, but that's, I don't know how you put that together, right? I mean, that particular gentleman, he knew it because he went in, he had that mindset. So he was looking for, how can I use this and he found a lot of them, and that's wonderful. And he's sharing that with his daughter and encouraging, I think it was his daughter that he was talking about. But yeah, so that was that. There's a lot of options available to you, right? So
going back to testing for the fire department.
Yes.
You threw your application out, shotgun.
Yep.
Did you, even though you were shotgunning applications and testing everywhere under the sun, was there an organization that you were like, oh man, if I get on that one, that's the one I really want, or did it really matter in the beginning?
Funny you ask. That's a great question. And it actually turned out to be 100% bass backwards. Seattle was my lowest choice, but I took it because they were the first one that offered. My preferred one was going to be City of Everett. If you said, hey, look, they're all available all at the same time, Everett would have been the one I jumped on because they had a current mayor that had been very, very, very friendly to the fire department in budgets and getting the fire department resources and things and so forth. So the morale was very high there, and people loved working for that department. Now mayors change, but it's like, okay. And after that, it probably would have been like Kirkland or Bellevue, smaller department, more of a family feel. I'd heard some ended up being rubbish, but I heard some bad information about, Seattle's this and that and this and that. In hindsight, I'm absolutely incredibly thankful that it was Seattle and that I went that route, because you know what? Kirkland doesn't have a boat. Kirkland doesn't have a tech rescue team. I don't think Everett has a boat. I don't think Everett has a tech They might have a hazmat team, but it's a van. City of Seattle has the hazmat team. The options, even though I didn't exercise any of the cool guy options,
they were there.
They were there. And there were times when I first started out, I wanted to actually drive Ladder Company 5. That's what I wanted. And when I first got,
stupid question for somebody who's not in the fire service. Why specifically Ladder Company number 5?
It's what I wanted. I don't have, again, we're back to I was a little kid and
how many ladder companies does Seattle Fire have?
They have 12.
And 5 was the one you wanted, though?
Yeah. It rolled out of Station 31 outside of Northgate, or it served the Northgate district. Now, it's one of the biggest districts in the city. It's Seattle is shaped like a peanut in the shell facing north and south, with water on both sides, a giant freshwater lake on the east side, and saltwater Puget Sound on the west side. You've got this little peninsula a little bit farther outside that juts out, which is West Seattle, which is almost like a different municipality just because of geography and how it works, but it's actually part of Seattle. So my district was huge. It was water to water and from 85th up to 145th, basically. There was a little bit of goofy lines how they drove, but that was a big district. We supported a lot of engine companies. And for people that don't know, every fire department is going to run it slightly different. They're going to have their own protocols and so forth. We ran 4-person staffing on our engines and 4-person staffing on our trucks. Our trucks were not quints. They didn't have pumps. They had 200 feet of what we called earthquake hose and a valve that we could attach to a hydrant with no pump in the event that there was an earthquake and we had to do something with it, but that was buried in a compartment. Our trucks were 60 foot, 80,000 pounds, tillered apparatus, and it was a giant toolbox. We carried a grand total of 5 gallons of water, 2.5 pound fire extinguisher, or 2.5 gallon pump can fire extinguishers. That's all the water we carried. We were a toolbox. We were at fire suppression. We were very much a support role. We would create access. We would perform rescues. My favorite job in that whole career is going to a roof of a building that's on fire, taking a chainsaw with a carbide chain and cutting a great big hole in it to let the smoke and the hot gases out.
You guys like making holes.
I like making holes. And it's an adrenaline rush. It's an absolute adrenaline rush. And I was fortunate to be on, even though my dream was Ladder 5, that ended up happening. Early in my career, I picked up the telephone and I called the guys at the rescue rig and said, because I learned about what that was. I didn't know who they were, how cool they were, until I was hired by them. I'm like, oh wow, this is really awesome. Maybe I don't want to be a Ladder 5 driver. Maybe I want to do that. And I called him up, and the particular individual, we later became friendly, but he was really kind of dismissive and arrogant on the phone. And, oh, you're new? Call me back when you got 5 years. Click. I was like, wow, you didn't even bother to ask what kind of qualifications somebody has. That's kind of a bad judgment call.
How big of an organization, numbers-wise?
About 1,000 uniform members in operations.
At that time?
Most of that's about their standard. They haven't really grown too much. As a matter of fact, right now, the last few years, they've been in a big staffing crisis. They don't have enough people. Bad.
Now, from my limited experience with the fire service, most of the men and women that I know of, they had to come in the door with some basic training, whether they put themselves through at the local junior college, like a fire academy or something like that. When you went into Seattle, did you walk in wet behind the ears, no nothing? They put you through their academy?
Yes. Seattle runs their own academy. They're big enough to do it. Most of the other departments, the smaller departments in the area, will send you to Bates or the one that's run by the State Patrol, some other third-party run academy. But Seattle's big enough, they run their own. And
it's just Seattle. They don't allow others.
No. And interestingly, since we're in California, they have a very different perspective on their EMS in Seattle as well. We don't run what we call in the fire service, we'll call it like an ALS rig, where you've got a 4-person company, but one of them is a medic. That's what our slang term for that. Oh, that's an ALS unit. The gentleman that started Medic One, which is head and shoulders the finest ALS pre-hospital emergency care program on the planet, Dr. Cobb and Dr. Kopis. And in order to be a medic in the Seattle Fire Department, you had to be a firefighter first with Seattle for 3 years. Then you could apply to the medic program. It didn't matter if you were a doctor someplace else. You went through Seattle Fire's medic program, and it was grueling. When you got out, you rode a medic unit. You were still a firefighter, and you were still expected to retain your firefighter certifications, but you rode a medic unit with another medic, and that's what you rode. Depending on staffing, every once in a while you'd see a medic that was working overtime and assigned to, Engine 40 or something like that. But for the most part, once you were a medic, you were done being a firefighter. Even though you were expected to maintain the skills, you were done being a firefighter and you were a paramedic. Some of the paramedics at the tail end of their career, because you just get the snot kicked out of you, run volume wise. And that was Dr. Kopis's, maybe Dr. Cobb. I never met Dr. Cobb. I did meet Dr. Kopis, tremendous man. That was sort of his thing, is reps are what's going to make you awesome. And he was, I heard he was brutally hard on his reviews of his medics. He'd back them. He'd stand behind them, but he'd also pull them aside and take a bite out of their butt if they didn't do things the way he thought they should be done. He was tremendous with support with firefighters. He happened to love us. And our structure was built on the firefighters all had to be an EMT basic level, but we were trained by our medics. So we were probably to the national registry standards that are maintained by the DOT. Yeah, sure, we'd pass those standards. But then our medics would go, okay, yeah, you got to be able to pass that test. But then once that test happens, this is how we really do it, and it's way better. And by every metrics that's used to measure effectiveness of pre-hospital emergency care of EMS, that program, to my knowledge, is still head and shoulders number one.
And what year did that program start?
I don't know. I think it was in the 60s. But please don't.
No,
I don't know,
because
it might have been it might have been the early 70s. It's funny. There are pictures, because I never wanted to stop. I would have loved to have earned the skills of being a medic. I really wanted that, but the way that structure was formatted, if I went that route, you're done being a firefighter. You're effectively. So I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to not ride that truck, and so I went, no, I'm not going to go that route. Respect it, admire it. I have friends that are medics, that were medics, I think very highly of. And yeah, there's a bell curve. You got your low performers too. But yeah, all in all, couldn't be more proud to have been working side by side with some of the best people on the planet doing what they did. And yeah.
Going back to the beginning though,
Yes.
What was it like for you going to the academy? Did you adapt to it well?
There was the doubts. They tried to run it a little bit like, I guess, basic military training. The individual that was in charge of it when I was there, because they would rotate through, was a former Marine. And so I think he liked to have his image and kind of keep that up. Definitely pretty regimented. We had one guy in our drill school who was a former Green Beret. And he told me when we're walking back from that to our parking lot at the end of the day, he goes, "This is harder than I ever did, in the Army." Like, wow, okay. Now, I don't know what he was referring to when he said that, because it couldn't have been harder than what you do to go, for those kind of selection processes. But it might have been a certain detail or from a certain perspective. But one of the challenges that we had is you're not living on site. Whenever an academy is done, you drive home to your home. You got to do your own laundry, cook your own food, prepare it for the next day, study what you need to study, and show back up the next day, ready to go do it all over again. And so I think that adds another layer than if you're living in barracks and you're somebody else is providing chow for you.
It's a double-edged sword, because
100%.
when you go home, the DIs they can't. They're not going to show up at your door at 3 o'clock in the morning.
100%.
When you're living on base or when you're living in the barracks or whatever, all
Absolutely.
of a sudden,
totally. And I don't want to minimize that either.
So it's a catch-22 either way.
Right. So yeah. But at that time, I went into the academy at 205 pounds and crazy fit. God billed me to run upstairs like nobody's business, and really quickly.
What is the grind? It's not just a routine, but the decision we make to wake up, give everything we've got, then find a way to go further. Grind, spelled GRND, is more than a brand. It's a movement, an emotion we all feel connected to as we work daily to pursue our goals and support each other. Founded by a former Army Ranger, Grind Activewear has a clear mission to give 100% and then some more in sport, fitness, and in life. Functional, high-quality performance wear that's rooted in American culture because you demand gear that outworks the rest. Whether you're on the field, in the gym, or building your own lane, Grind is for those who refuse to settle. Go check out thegrindcollective.com and tap into something bigger than clothing. And while you're there, use the promo code TRANSITION15 to get 15% off your purchase. You're likely already on the grind. Maybe you just don't realize it yet, but the grind continues.
The group said, no, you don't get to be the first in line going upstairs ever again. Because I was at floor 7 when they were at 5. And they're like, no, you're making us all look bad. You can't do that. So sorry, guys. And yeah, but that's just how I got blessed. By then, I was strong. I had, gym was church. And what I would do is getting up to every physical. I had a baseline of workouts that I would do to get fit, get strong, and try to find that right balance of power, strength, muscle endurance, and cardiovascular stamina, and all of those things. And then, hey, when a test would come up, hey, my next physical is this test. These are the specifics because it's all published. I might adjust my workouts to target that a little bit. And then as soon as that one was done, the next one was 2 or 3 months later. It's like, okay, how do I need to adjust it to maximize my performance on that test? And so that's just what I would do.
Did the fire department have a mandatory physical fitness requirement annually?
No, they did not.
So once you got out of the academy, there was no mandatory physical fitness.
Correct. And I think that's absolutely bad. I was a massive advocate that we needed to have some sort of an ongoing physical fitness standard. And if you come back from an injury, you should have, there should be something that you need to go through and demonstrate that your body's ready to do that. And if you can't, okay, do you need more time? Maybe you need more time. Maybe, but that's just my opinion. So if the union had fought for that kind of stuff, we would have had it, I'm sure.
Again, going back to our conversation in the beginning when we're talking about, law enforcement firefighters, that's one of those things that does not change slowly. There are agencies that have slowly started making physical fitness, just a minimum physical fitness standard, an annual test.
Yeah.
But again, you have a big aircraft carrier and stuff does not turn or change rapidly.
I actually had I wrote up a proposal and handed it to anybody that would read it. And when I was on the testing circuit, one of the organizations had their physical agility test it's like 12 stations. And 12 of them were more like flexibility and balance and coordination and maybe some stamina. And 12 of them were more strength and power. And I looked at it and I go, you know what? It wouldn't be that hard to put together a phase in over a period of time. So first year, you audit what's going to be mandatory next year. Next year, one's mandatory and you get to audit what's going to come in as mandatory the following year. And so you'd have this, I guess with 12, you'd have a 7-year cycle of phasing this in. And you don't necessarily have to, does the 55-year-old deputy chief, which is above a battalion chief, do they need to do X amount of push-ups and pull-ups? No, they don't. They're being used more for this. But if you're being issued bunker gear and could be expected to put on an SCBA, you need to have a certain level of physical fitness. Because if the stuff hits the fan and you decide, hey, I'm going to go in and pull out, hypothetical Bob, I'm gonna put myself we're putting something. You need to not make the scene worse because you're not fit.
Right.
And that's, but at the same time, culture changed. Earlier in my career, fire house meals were tater tots and mayonnaise. And by the time we were done, people were going keto. People were, no, I need to do this, low carb, and Atkins was big for some people, and the Body for Life that Bill Phillips wrote and all that. So you saw people were embracing more health and more longevity, which is good. That's a good thing. I think both of our careers would benefit from that, because when your career's done, you still get to live the rest of your life. What do you want it to be like?
But it also goes back to, you chose a profession that require maybe not every single shift.
Sure.
But there is a good chance that you are going to have to put out. You're going to have to put out at 100%. Yep. And are you able to?
Right. Well, some of the old timers had a saying, we don't get paid for what we do. We get paid for what we could be asked to do. And I think there's some truth to that. A lot of truth to that. What could that next bell be? You don't know.
Yeah, it's a balancing act.
Sure.
You want to stay at a level of fitness to where you're still able to do the career today, but you should also be thinking about what you're going to be like after you walk away 100%. From these careers.
Yeah.
Coming out of the academy.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier that you wanted ladder company number 5.
Yeah.
But amongst your peers and everybody else coming out of the academy, what was like the dream station to go to?
There's a couple of downtown companies where a lot of guys really liked the culture that revolved around the downtown companies. A lot of image, a lot of pomp and circumstance. Ladder 5 is an outline company, so a little more gritty.
Is it more residential, or is it still largely commercial?
That part has more residential, not as many high rises as the stuff downtown. So your call profile looks very different. Your average call profile looks different. Your call volume
is it basically right at the edge of suburbia, so to speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
For a city, because even cities have neighborhoods with houses and residential areas. So yeah, but heavily residential. There were a couple of high rises. And the high rises that we had were Seattle Housing Authority buildings that were made out of concrete. So if you had a fire in that, its contents, the building itself isn't going to burn. It's cinder blocks and concrete. But we still had to learn how to and know how to handle that. But at the same time, on multiple alarms, I got pulled into the heart of the city on a 4-alarm lumber mill fire. Okay. Great. You got to know how to do that. So, and if you work overtime, I might get sent to, ladder company 10. But now I wouldn't, or you wouldn't, because they've become a specialty unit, but you could get sent to a ladder 4.
Right.
And you're okay. Now you're dealing with, the smallest building you have is 12 stories and it's about to be torn down. So, because everything else is 50, stuff like that.
Did you end up at ladder 5 right out of the gate?
No, I didn't. It took me about 3 years to get to it.
Was it a station house that a lot of people wanted to get to?
It was kind of coveted, but at that time it was not a lot of turnover there. And so I ended up, there's a couple of people that got there. There's a few of us that wanted to get there, and because the transfers were seniority based at that time, it was strictly seniority based by that time. It was like, okay, how do I get there? I just got to be the guy with the most seniority. When you're brand new, so I ended up on a crew that was needed some better leadership, and but I outlasted everybody, and there were days I was just pulling my hair out, going, do I transfer out? Do I give up? But we ended up, I'm pretty proud to say this, and I don't want to be disrespectful to the people that were there before me. But when you're there for that long, I was there for almost 20 years. You get to have some input in, because even though people could say, hey, I want to come here, great, you still have that conversation. Are you going to be a good fit for what we are? And so I had a lot of influence in making that crew what it was by the time that I'd left. And I was really proud of that crew. I'd take that crew and put us up against anybody for our effectiveness, our diligence, our fitness, our knowledge, our aggressiveness. I had 4 times the time at that company than the next most senior person who was, or most longer tenured, who happened to be the officer.
So it's not purely seniority. It's the most senior liked person.
Well, the rules say seniority.
Right.
And could a chowderhead come in and say, well, I got the number, so I'm going to take it? Yeah. Okay.
But what I mean is 10 guys put in for a particular ladder house.
Sure.
Once you got into the ladder house that you wanted, I'm saying behind the curtain, was there kind of a round table, either maybe a just senior leadership or whatever, like, hey, what's the reputation of these 10 guys? So number 4 might be the most senior of the group, but we like number 7, but he's got a year less, but we're still going to take him. We
don't get that control. It's whoever has the senior, the numbers. Of putting in, of who puts in at that for those non-specialty units. When the specialty units are looking for people, there is an interview component in addition to additional testing. And so at that interview, they have some flexibility and, hey, if this guy's really got a bad attitude or something like that, maybe we don't want them.
So then if it has to be the most senior person, then how quickly, and I'll put it into terminology of how quickly, once they're there, does the culture start saying, this is how you play the game here, regardless of what you're coming to the game with?
Correct. Towards the tail end of my time there, I was the driver. And here's another, I want to answer the question. It's a great, but it needs a little bit of context. Drivers in Seattle, drivers an inherited position, but it's still tested. So when an existing driver leaves, promotes, retires, whatever, the most senior person in the department that's on that crew, it's their job. But they have to pass a pass-fail test to actually get you're signed off, you are the driver. And I kind of like that because that means that there's an impetus to get to some place that you want. If you want to be a driver, if you want to take that career path, get there and learn the district. The district is not just right turn, left turn. It's learn that building. Learn that building. Hey, that building's addressed here, but our best access is actually coming out here. So when the address comes over dispatch, you're going to this address. Oh, hey, I'm not going to take you to the front door. I'm taking you to the side door because the fire alarm panel's there, and that sets us up best to handle an emergency. Oh, okay, great. That's the kind of district knowledge that I'm referring to when I say you learn your district. So once you are, as the driver, you're kind of like the first among equals. Same rank. There's no difference in rank. But go back to like the Viking attitude as you're first among equals. And as the driver, when we would have an impending vacancy, also, I've got kind of a big personality. They'd call me. Hey, I'm thinking about putting in for it. Do you think I'd be a good fit? It's like, you know what? Let's, why don't you come out, talk to the crew, and then we'll see. Great. And, they'd come by, talk to the crew. One of your previous guests talked about in the fire service, you bring an offering. So it's, something. It doesn't historically it was ice cream, but it doesn't have to be ice cream. It could be something to just acknowledge, hey, you're taking your time. I want to, it's not a penance, but it's just a recognition of respect.
So is driver basically what I've heard referred to as an engineer?
In engineer is typically the term given for people that drive a pumper.
Okay.
Or an engine. So engines and pumpers are kind of like synonymous terms. Ladders or trucks are kind of synonymous terms. And when you get to some agencies, you'll have trucks that also have a pump on them. Those are called quints. And usually you'll find those in smaller departments because they don't have the resources to separate them out fully. And the roles and responsibilities on emergency scenes are very, very different between those two. On a car extrication, we got to cut the car apart. In that role, the engine takes the support role and the truck is the one that takes the lead in my old department. We were the ones that the engines carried lots and lots of hose, 500 gallons of water, a pump that's a PTO pump, and some basic first aid supplies, and a few entry tools, like a set of bolt cutters, and that's about it. A Halligan tool, maybe an axe, but they're not carrying what we carry. They do usually take a chainsaw and put them on the engine companies, but it's an old chainsaw that's about to be retired or something like that. It's like, okay, hey, when the trucks, when they cycle new chainsaws through, they'll take the best of some of them become parts, and some of them, the best of ones that aren't parts get put on the engines, and they get buried behind other stuff, usually.
When you're putting in for driver, have you already gone to any type of school to actually drive the truck?
No, and that's something that I was trying to change. I was a part of the driver instruction group with that department, and I was trying to, again, aircraft carrier takes a long time to turn it, trying to get that. Hey, we need to have this be a tested position. But in many departments where the driver is a tested position, you take a test just like you would test for officer. You take a test and you get ranked. And if you're number 2 on the list and they filled out number 1 and the next vacancy is 12 stations away, you just move to that. So you go to that and you are now a driver there and you don't know that district, or you may not know that district. So, and you don't know that crew. You might not be a good fit for that crew. Crew continuity, in my opinion, there's a high value in that. When you're short staffed and you have all the overtime that happens, you get hodgepodge crews, and the crew continuity kind of goes out the window, which is a problem that's been experienced that they were experiencing even before we were all canned. So.
Again, it goes back to that catch-22. There's arguments, I'm sure, for both sides of it, but it almost seems like, if you know that this is what you're intending as your career progression,
yes,
then at some point in time, you need to go to the basic driving school just so we know that when you do put in for driver 3 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever, you at least can maneuver the vehicle.
Right. I was part of the team. Now, a gentleman named Steve Carruthers put together a program for tractor driving aerial, the Tillard Rigs instruction program. And it's probably the finest program like that on the planet. And I was blessed to be able to be part of his instructor cadre. And so when somebody would put in for a truck, and they got the position, they wouldn't just do this to anybody. You had to be on the truck. Once you got it, you get put on the calendar to go to tiller school. And we would take you down to the joint training facility where there's massive parking lot and set up cones. And we would get you paired with somebody else who also needed the training. And we would run you through like a rodeo course of teaching you how the nuances of driving an articulated tractor drawn aerial truck, what it's like. And then after that, that portion was concluded, then you'd have X amount of hours on the road where your driving partner is supposed to be a properly, regularly assigned driver, and you flop back and forth in both seats so you understand the nuances of both seats. And you're not driving to calls yet. You're just, hey, we're going out. We're going to go drive for an hour. So you go sit in the front seat. I'm going to sit in the back, and we're coaching. We're just driving around the district, and that sort of thing. So there is a process. It's somewhat formal. I would have loved to see it be, and I'm sure Steve would have loved to see it much more formal than that. So it's my understanding he actually had a company that he went privately contracted to other fire departments all around the country and took his program to them when they would start buying those tractor drawn aerials. Cause it's a different cat. It's a real different vehicle to drive. And when you understand what you can do with those things, it's amazing. It really is amazing. So yeah, that was pretty fun. And then, so made it to,
I'm thinking of the episode of Seinfeld where Kramer drove it. That's 100% accurate, correct?
Totally. It's funny in that the PowerPoint for that class actually has that clip in the PowerPoint. It's pretty funny. But yeah, so it's a fun thing. And the thing about that is that's one of the few classes that with the exception of one person, everybody that took that class when I was in an instructor capacity was happy and excited to be there. And sometimes teaching a class where people don't want to be there, that's a pain in the ass. That's really frustrating because nobody wants to be there. And people instructing it probably don't want to be instructing it. But somebody with paperwork said, hey, we have to have this class. You're going to teach it and everybody's going to learn it. Rah, rah, rah. That one, everybody's like, dude, I get to learn how to drive a tiller truck today. And I do think that the tiller job is the coolest job in the fire service. I think a fire captain on a truck is the best job, but I think the coolest job is the tiller.
Well, that was going to be my next question.
Oh, yeah.
Any point in time, did you go down the path or explore the path of testing for captain?
I was honored. In our department, we had the officer starts at lieutenant, and then there's a captain.
Oh, okay.
So which it's, but a lot of departments don't have a lieutenant. Some of them, the lieutenant is the driver, and it's sort of a step to do. So all different departments have their own nuances. Our department the rank was firefighter. You had lieutenant, you had captain, battalion chief, deputy chief, assistant chief, and then the chief. And I pondered promoting. Taking the test to promote. I didn't really want to, because one of the reasons I didn't want to is when you do, you're cannon fodder. You're in the wind. You don't get, if you're at a crew that you know and love and like, and you're kicking ass and you're doing a great job, you're going to be separated from that crew. You don't get to stay on that crew. And I didn't want to give that up. But at the same time, I was also deeply honored by some people who I had very high regard for that said, hey, Davy, this department really needs not just people like you. We really need you to test, please. And thought about it, and maybe I should have, but I believe that you can lead from any position. One of the books that I do like, John Maxwell's 360-Degree Leader, talks about that a little bit. And when the shit hits the fan, it's funny. Even your chiefs will sometimes look at the truck driver, because they're usually the old bull, and say, what do we do? Especially if that chief is promoted quickly and maybe hasn't spent much time on a truck. What do we do now? And I was pretty fortunate that I had pretty decent officers. But at the same time, one of my officers was out on an injury, and I got assigned a acting officer who was actually a rookie of mine years prior. And he's like, yeah, well, we're right back to you teaching me how to do truck work. And he's in the right front seat. So my job was to set him up for success and teach him. I felt that my responsibility was to do what I could to teach him how he needed to do that job the best. And at that juncture, fortunately, I knew my job well enough that you never want to see you do it on autopilot, but I knew mine well enough that it was like, okay, hey, Matt, you might want to do this. Hey, you ought to be thinking about this, And if there's something that needed my absolute perfect attention, it was like, hey, we're going into a neighborhood 3 districts away. I need you to map that. Okay. That's my job. But is to get our crew there safely and as fast as I can get us there without too much danger to the public or my crew.
I believe every one of us needs to work through our pros and cons list as far as testing for, promoting. And what you said, I agree with you 100%. It doesn't matter the stripes, the bars, whatever. Sure. You can still be a leader.
Yeah.
That being said, when you're not part of the leadership team,
yes,
you don't have as big of a voice.
100%.
And so when it comes to making the necessary changes or it's not always about you're going to make change. One of the things that I realized once I promoted up was you at least get to be a voice in the room to say, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right solution is, but the solution that you're proposing is not the best idea. We need to look at other options. Right. So what I would say is everybody's got to make their own decision as far as what they're going to do. When I first promoted from investigator to supervising investigator, my chief asked me, what's your greatest failure in your career? And I said, not challenging myself to move into a leadership position earlier in my career. So
I think that's a valid statement, right? I mean, I want to be respectful how I say this because I didn't serve in the military, but as best as I can kind of give a comparison, how our department was structured, your drivers were kind of like your platoon sergeants. They pretty much ran the crew, but the officer was one ultimately in charge.
But unlike the military, you're not going to have a 20-year-old lieutenant, 22-year-old lieutenant who's never even been in a fire before. He may not know how to drive the truck. He may not know. She may not know. But they've still been a firefighter to that point.
They have, but in my department, there was a handful of examples of people that tested the moment they were eligible, and they had spent their careers at the slowest station they could be at. And so what they brought was youth, not a lot of wisdom, and not much experience. So and I'm not trying to be contrary. It's just.
And on the flip side,
yeah,
I'm sure for every one of those, there was another one who 12, 13 years in working busy stations.
Yeah.
They step in as a lieutenant, and you as a driver go, bro, you got this. Yeah. I don't need to do anything.
Right. 100%. And those are the people that you're like, I thought that part of the standard for being eligible to test to promote to your next rank should not have been necessarily years. It should have been actually calls, because at my old department, 5 years at 2s is very different than 5 years at 20s. It's crazy different. 10 years at 20s is not what 5 years at 2s or 28s or 31s is. Or 25s.
I don't think it should be a requirement, but it should be an evaluation tool.
Sure.
Hey, did you have the opportunity to work a different firehouse? Right. Did you take the opportunity, or did you slough the opportunity? Right. Did you take the opportunity to challenge yourself, or did you get into some place that was comfortable and you just kind of rode it?
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side, what if there's a good battalion chief or a good chief working that firehouse?
Yeah.
And as a young lieutenant, you're like, man, I'm going to learn so much if I stay under this guy's wing,
sure,
as opposed to going to a busier station. So it shouldn't necessarily be an automatic fault.
Right.
One of the things I've always thought about, though, is you're from our side of the house, because unlike the military, you can be an officer right out of the academy. You go to 4 years of college and, hey, go lead.
You're 22, go. Yeah.
Where the first responder community, I think one of the things that it should be, again, an evaluation tool is there should be a 360 evaluation. Mm-hmm. You should get the input of every member of the organization. What do you think about that person as a leader? You're going to get... it's kind of like the bell curve.
Sure.
You're going to lop off the top 10 that go, they're a big piece of dumpster fire. And you're going to lop off the other one. He's the best thing next. He invented sliced bread.
Right. Yeah.
And then you take the middle of it all.
Right. And I believe that, couldn't agree more with that. I just couldn't agree more. The obstacle that you have with the larger departments is they purposely, that kind of an evaluation would be,
it's time intensive,
and it's subjectivity, or
yes,
it's subjective.
Yes.
And they want to remove subjectivity out of it because they don't want to open themselves up for lawsuits for discrimination. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe they have a certain ethnic makeup and maybe they'd be a terrific officer, but one of the people that gives them a bad review just doesn't like that ethnicity. Maybe they're prejudiced. And that's what
I'm saying. You have to, you throw out and you try to get a mean.
Right.
It's not a perfect scenario. And no. I haven't sure. sat down to actually formulate it. It's just something that always
kind of concept. Yeah. And plans start with general concepts, right? And, unless you're in
because I go back to like being on a SWAT or a tactical team.
Yeah.
Or I would even imagine the advanced rescue team that you talked about within the firehouse.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, everybody who puts in for that entire team roundtables. Hey, what do we think of this person?
Sure.
What do we think about them coming on our team?
Yeah, it's probably not formal.
Oh, no.
But I promise you it happens. And we had it.
The conversations are private. Yep. It does not leave this room.
Yep.
Throw it out on the table.
Yeah. The beanery table, we would call it the beanery table. In the Seattle Fire Department, the kitchen table is called the beanery, or the kitchen is called the beanery. There's a long history behind that, and I probably don't even understand it fully and correctly. But so the beanery table is the kitchen table. And historically, that's a sacred place. And people have laughed and cried and played jokes and been, that's a very, very, very special place. And I think it should be. So yeah, but I totally agree with you that those conversations happen. They need to happen. And then sometimes when somebody shows up and they do get in, and somebody has to have the stones to have that hard conversation.
A lot of times though, they also need a mentor. I don't say a mentor, a voucher. Like, hey, who's the person nominating, You know,
yeah. Well,
who's gonna be the one who kind of says, "Hey, I'm all right. I'll start this off. I vouch for this person."
Right. And you know, if the person's done their job, and I put a rookie guide together that grew to a pretty big guide, and I did it because I wish that there was a document like that I could have had access to when I came into the fire service. On the tail end of that part of that document, I put something in there, and I would give that as an informal document to my rookies. I knew it couldn't come from administration. It couldn't come from the lieutenant, but it can come from me as a peer, as a potential mentor to the rookie. And so,
I was going to ask you because I did read through it, and there's a lot of good information in there.
Sure.
Was that all lessons you learned on your own, or is that compiled from other people who put, maybe not written, but verbally?
There was kind of the inspiration for that document came from a cartoon in a fire engineering magazine. And Paul Combs, the pretty famous fire cartoonist, drew the picture for it. I don't know who came up with the actual material of the list. So some of it, but when you do it in like a magazine that folds out, you can't put paragraphs to explain it. It's a simple statement. And I tried to take the comments and expand on it to offer nuance and some context to those to some of those things. And then there was lessons I learned. Don't do it this way. I did it. It sucked. It was bad. You know, hey, this worked out pretty well for me. I did solicit opinions from other people that I respected, and the goal was trying to help offer a perspective to new people about how to do that job the right way. And I always had the attitude I wanted to do it the right way. If early in my career, in my youth and inexperience and immaturity, I summed it up this way, where if someone was on a fire ground or fire scene and things were going bad and they heard on the radio that the unit that Davy was on is getting dispatched, awesome, help is coming, it's going to get better soon. To the extent that I had the capacity to do that because I was showing up prepared, skilled, ready to go to work and proficient at my job. Was I successful with that every day? No. I was human. My God, there were days I just totally stepped in it. We all do. But I tried to own it, not shuffle it off. Screwed up, guys. I'm sorry. Going to do better. Let's go do some training to make sure that, not punitively, but let's go make sure that I don't do this again. You know,
one of the cool things about it when I was reading it is you put the addendum at the end that basically says, hey, I've disseminated this. It's come back to me that I could have put more. And where I'm going with it is it stayed as a living document that you 100%. Continued to add 100%. To it. Did you find that along that lines of it being received? Because there's some stuff in there that it seems like it's basic common sense, but I could see how it could rub somebody the wrong way if they don't see it that way. One of the things that's jumping out of my head, hey, the normal end of night is 2200. If you've got time to go sit and watch TV, you're giving the impression that you've pretty much got it all figured out and I'm good to go. Maybe you want to put the impression out there that you still want to learn.
Right.
Go study something.
Right.
You know, and it's those things that, again, I always try to preface this. I really think that the millennial generation has gotten a bad rap. Mm-hmm. I think that they do a lot of good things. Mm-hmm. And one of the best things that I think they're doing for these careers is they understand that these are just jobs. They're not going to make them their lives. And too many of our brothers and sisters, when we first came in, that was all this was. So I think that they're doing some great things. But I could also see you handing that document to somebody young, kind of like, hey, old fucker, I don't need to listen to you, you know, kind of.
Right.
Did you start seeing that, or did you ever experience that?
I had it with one person. And he wasn't even one of my rookies. It was like, oh, you know, I think to a person, every rookie that I had that was my rookie was like appreciative of it. They liked it. Now, maybe they were just acting it, and maybe they took it home and used it for toilet paper. I don't care. At that juncture, I did. Well, I care, but I don't let that keep me up at night. I don't worry about that. What they chose to do with it, I did my job, which was to offer mentorship. But the thing about mentorship is that the mentee has to seek it. As a mentor, if you're cramming it down their throat, that's not mentorship. That's you know, hierarchical following orders, right? Giving orders. But no, mentorship is something that needs to be sought. And my goal was to be able to offer myself as a mentor if people felt that I was worthy of it, and live that so that people thought that I was worthy of it. Not because I wanted accolades. I wasn't like looking to, toot my own horn. And that touches on another thing that you mentioned with one of your other guests about in our world, our worlds, many of us aren't used to tooting our own horn. And when we have had to make tooting your own horn is looked down upon, right, by your peers. Oh, what are you? God's gift. But then since this is the Transition Drill podcast, when we make that transition out of that as a vocation, if you're retired and you're going fishing or going RVing, God bless you, you're good. But for anybody who still has to have some sort of a profession or vocation or a business or a job afterwards, we have to find that way of communicating our value to our prospective business partnership. Whether it's somebody who's now a small contractor communicating my value to you want your bathroom remodeled. Am I your guy, or is this guy your guy? This is why I think you should pick me. Why I would be a good decision. This is why I wouldn't be a good decision. And so those are things that tooting your own horn is not something I really want to do, but we have to find a way to promote ourselves properly, right? So yeah, but with the mentoring with the younger guys coming behind, I only had one person that oh, can I get a copy of that? Yeah, sure. Went out, printed a copy of them. Here you go. Oh, a little light reading. Snap it back. Good luck.
The one piece in there that I want to commend you on.
Oh, what's that?
You should get up earlier than everybody else, clean up and start making coffee. I like how you prep the firehouse for all the senior guys.
Well, and here's
granted, it's not written that exact way, but that's the
right.
gist.
Well, but here's the coffee in the firehouse, at least in Seattle, is cultural. It's a big deal, and that was something that I really stepped in because I'm not a coffee drinker at all. I've never been a coffee drinker, and getting into when I first got into it, it was not something that I really connected. I didn't make that connection that, hey, even though I'm not drinking coffee, everybody else in the station drinks it. Make the coffee and figure out how to make it the right way. And
it's a nice smell to wake up to.
Right. I do like the smell. I actually do like the smell. I just don't like how it tastes. But so yeah, I mean, that was, I wanted to be a really good rookie. I wasn't. The situation that I was in was maybe not ideal, but what's ideal?
Did you not have good mentors, or did you not listen to your mentors?
It's a good question. I don't know. What was confessed to me later was that the station captain went down to our academy and said, hey, I want a high energy person because I want to see if I can inspire. I know this crew's getting one of the rookies coming out of this class. I want a high energy guy because I want to see if I can inspire that crew to pick up their game. And years later, we bumped into each other in Costco and he says, I really owe you an apology. I hosed you on that one. I wasn't trying to. I love this guy. Heart is wonderful. But he said, he goes, I think I may have inadvertently not used good judgment on that, because he's basically what he's trying to do is trying to get a rookie to change the tone of a crew. Can't do that.
You can't put that pressure on.
You can't put that pressure.
It's a lose-lose situation, sure, almost in every way you look at it.
Yeah.
Because even if the captain was like, I want to change the culture of this firehouse and I need a young guy to be my proxy.
Sure.
I'm going to lead by example. Hey guys, but then you've got me, everybody in the middle who's still slagging behind, and then I got the one rookie. So it's like you're setting them up for failure.
It was, let's put it this way. I was 9 months into my first year, and I was going, is this what this job is? If this is what this career is, I'm going to quit. Not because I'm a quitter, but because this is so different than anything I've thought this could ever possibly be. It's like, no, it was not pleasant. Now, I do want to say that as my career progressed, I developed nice relationships with the people that were on that crew at that time. But at that juncture, there was a lot of goofy stuff that was happening, had just happened on that crew prior to me coming there. And so, in an attempt to try to, I want to be fully transparent about this. They weren't a bunch of chowderheads. It was just there was dynamics that were going on there, and I think well of the people that I was there with. So all of them. So there was a staffing shuffle, and at the tail end of my time there, that ended. I got bumped, and it was an opportunity for me to say, okay, I got bumped. Fine. I went to a different station, got along great with those guys. And so, but I was trying to, by that time I made my junk. I was like, no, I'm going to try to get up to ladder 5. And so that was a process, and made it up to ladder 5. And, a number of years later, I'm find myself the driver. And at the time that my employment ended, I had become the senior driver, which is, an informal, but, kind of a tip of the cap. You're the senior driver now, which meant that I was the longest tenured driver of the drivers across all 4 shifts. We had 4 platoons. They used A, B, C, and D to delineate the platoons, and so yeah, I was on C shift, and we put together a pretty good crew. It was pretty awesome. Very thankful. Back
to the document that you put together for the rookies. So now let me ask from the organization side.
Yeah.
Did you have to get permission, or was there ever any pushback from the organization about you creating a written document?
I didn't ask. And I...
Did it ever come back to bite you?
Nope, never bit me. When we got our new lieutenant, I handed him this document, and I said, as a courtesy to you, I'm letting you know I give this to my rookies. He handed it back to me like 4 or 5 days later with a whole bunch of red pen on it. And I go, what's this? He says, well, corrections that you can make. I go, no, that's my document. That's not yours. That's coming from me informally. If it comes from you, it's formal because you're the officer.
I only ask because I could see if something was in there.
Sure.
Everybody's gone through a training officer program.
Sure.
Every one of us has been told something by a training officer that sticks with us to this day. It wasn't written down anywhere.
Right.
There would be no way to verify that it was said in that car, in that truck, whatever. You're giving somebody a document that could be produced later on and go, well, when I was in training, this is what I got.
Right. I guess it was a risk. Well, yeah, it was a risk. I didn't think it was too big of a risk, clearly, because I continued to give it out. And, I think I opened it with, this is informal. This is not coming from the department. This is coming from somebody who wants to see you succeed. And these are suggestions. So, in some form of verbiage like that. And by not having it come from the officer, it gives them plausible deniability.
Right.
And I kind of wanted to have them have that offer them that courtesy. Right. So yeah, it was, I'll take the lumps. I was okay with it.
I just wondered if it, other than, the one lieutenant wanting you to make corrections and stuff, did you ever get any pushback?
No, I didn't.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm happy for your organization because I'm sure at some point in time it became known, even in other firehouses, that you were probably giving this out to rookies because they probably took their copy and it went to another, who knows how many others have been handed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it's one of my colleagues who's former colleagues, who's very entrepreneurial. He said, you ought to ebook that and sell it on Amazon for $10. He goes, there's a lot of wisdom in that.
For anybody listening, we'll sell it here for $5. Send me an email. I got a copy.
Right. Yeah. And so yeah, I mean, the thing is I didn't, and this is maybe where my entrepreneurial skills are stunted, but I didn't do it to make money. I did it because I give a shit. I wanted to leave that place better than I found it. And in the time that I've been gone, because we're it's end of May. So we're basically 3.5 years from the end of my career. I've been blessed, and I consider honored that a number of people have even recently still called me and said, "Hey, Davy, what do you think? What do you think I ought to do? Do you have some thoughts on this?" And if I'm still getting that, then what that is telling me that I think I made the right kind of mark. I think I left the right kind of. I know I ruffled feathers. I absolutely know I ruffled the feathers. And for the most part, the people whose feathers I ruffled, I don't give a shit because I don't respect them. For the most part. But
were you ruffling feathers to make the organization better, or were you ruffling feathers just for your own personal gratification of I want to screw with them?
Make the organization better. I'm not the kind of person that. If I've ever been in an instructing role or formal or informal, I don't ask trick questions. I try to ask open-ended questions to get people to think, but I cannot recall a time where I've tried to ask a gotcha question, unless you're telling a joke. But because if I'm asking gotcha questions, I'm eroding trust. I want to build trust. And in order to build trust, I have to offer you trust. And be open to you and let you see that I'm here to, I have your best interest in mind. Okay. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to screw up. If I hurt your feelings, I'm probably going to say, I'm sorry for hurting your feelings because I don't want to hurt feelings. But at the same time, sometimes feelings are less important than certain facts, or certain messages that information or something like that. So, yeah, I really wanted to leave that place better than I found it. And I know I left Ladder Company C better than I found it.
The reason why I asked that question, what color fire trucks are Seattle's trucks?
They are red.
Okay. A new chief could come in, a new lieutenant, whatever you want to call it, could come into a firehouse, pull the team together. Our red fire trucks are perfect.
Okay.
There's going to be somebody in that group who's going to disagree with them just because they want to disagree.
100%.
They know the fire trucks are red, but they're going to say, nope, they're not red. They're fire orange or clarify the color. They're not ruffling feathers because they want to do something productive.
Right.
They're ruffling feathers just because they've gotten so disgruntled in their career. Any opportunity they can to poke,
to be contrary, they take it. Right.
And that's why I asked the question. And we've all worked with those people.
We have. And unfortunately, I think that's a mark of a sick culture. There's a sickness, not the whole culture, but the sickness or the culture has an illness. And then you have to figure, how do we undo that? How do we make that culture healthy? Because culture will eat policy for lunch all day long. So how do you influence culture to make it? You got to find the right people. And you got to have the right attitude in the right people. And then you have to demonstrate that you value those right attitudes. And that takes time. And we're turning aircraft carriers. So, but in a 21-year career, almost 22 years, I was a month shy of 22 years for a career. You'd like to think that you could make some movement towards making things better. And I feel really, was there more I would have liked to have done? Sure. I'm at peace with what, again, I wasn't perfect. I'm not claiming perfection. I'm not saying I was God's gift to the fire department or Seattle Fire Department or any of that. I was just trying to do it the right way. And yeah, I ruffled some feathers,
Before we get into your exit, you mentioned earlier 15 injuries, all related to the job?
No. Most of them, I've had 15 surgeries.
15 surgeries.
15 surgeries. The majority of them, I think it's like 9 or 10. Maybe 8 or 9 were related to the job. I've had a few that were obviously not. When you're talking about surgery, some of it's wisdom teeth or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But I've had tendons pulled off the bone. I'm missing a bone in my foot that I broke that wouldn't heal. I've had my right ankle rebuilt. They've been into my left shoulder 3 times, and they've been into my back once. What else? I've had a little belly button hernia. Like, oh, what's that? And so, yeah, fix it. Okay, So and there's others too. So yeah, I mean, I say that I've given my health, in service to my fellow, my coworkers and the citizens that I served. There's not a minute of any day that I don't have pain somewhere. My adrenal system is destroyed. Absolutely, havoc has been wreaked on it. My testosterone system is absolutely messed up. I've been on testosterone supplementation for a decade. It was absolutely in the tank. I got to use a CPAP machine. So I had stopped at the tail end of my career for like the last half of my career. I'd stopped basically dreaming. It took me 8 months after I'd separated from the fire department to actually start having dreams again. This is a job, that's a career that extracts a toll on your body. A number of your guests talk about the PTS stuff. I get a little bit sticky on that one. I like to say PTSI, not D, because it's not a disorder. It's an injury. It's empirically observable as an injury on the brain. And I want to try to do my best to do what I can to lift the stigma of it being a disorder. And I'm not trying to preach or chastise. I'm just trying to share how I try to look at it. And I want to say, I think it was an interview with Andy Stump. And I
have not had the fortunate time of being able to sit and talk to Andy Stump.
Okay. But
if anybody knows him and wants to give him a call, I'd love to sit and talk with him.
But I think I want to say, I think it was Mike Glover that had it, where they're kind of talking about this very topic. It's like, no, it's an injury. It's not a disorder. If you get a pathogen and your body gives you a fever, is the fever a disorder? No, the fever is the body's natural defense mechanism. So using that as an analogy. Now, I'm not a brain doctor. I'm not a psychotherapist or anything, so I don't know. I have colleagues that have taken their lives. I want to say it was 2019 that it was shared to me that firefighter suicide had overtaken the line of duty, the most prolific line of duty death over cancer. And I'm sorry, I'm not okay with that. I don't know if I have PTS or an injury from PTS. It's part of the way that we got separated. I haven't had the funding or the timing or the time to go seek mental health and see if, gosh, has there been an injury that's been done to me? I don't know. On that, I got the joint aches and pains to share. Yeah, I got injuries, but I probably need 2 or 3 more surgeries from stuff that's lingering. That's like, I got to get this fixed. All
I would say is, when I started doing this podcast, that was one of the first things that I learned. And I can't remember to this day if I read it or somebody told me. It's for the vernacular. It's no longer referred to as PTSD.
Right.
There's very few professional people or anybody who will refer to it. It's PTS.
Right.
And I just made, in a weird way, just because of the tongue twister aspect of it, I just always refer to it as trauma.
Sure.
And the one thing I will guarantee you that these careers will give you
is trauma.
100%. And what I would recommend for everybody is to go get the prescribed list of symptoms of post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
And see how many of them, if you had to put a little check next to them, how many of them you check.
I should do that.
And if you don't think you do, if you don't think that you have PTS, trauma, whatever it is, just go through the checklist and see where you end up.
Yeah.
But be honest with yourself.
You got to be honest with it. And frankly, some of this stuff might be, hey, honey, do you see me exhibiting any of these symptoms? And could be, right?
You just said something. I don't dream, or I didn't dream for 15 years.
Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, I can't tell you the last time I had a dream.
Right.
Do I wake up in the morning and feel like I didn't get a good night's sleep? No, I feel like I but do I now I always kind of play it as, I don't remember my dreams. Maybe it's because there's nothing to remember because I'm not dreaming.
Right. Well, I've had the dreams where you woke up, I had this great dream. Can you remember it? No. but you remember that you had one, right? And so yeah, and look, and I want to make myself available if I'm thinking of it wrong by kind of taking that stance on dropping the D, or
you're not.
I'm open to, I would love to hear other perspectives on that, but so far I haven't heard somebody be able to articulate in a way that I can embrace that it's still a disorder.
I'd be hard pressed if you would go find especially anything in writing that is current.
Yeah.
Even I'll easily say 2025, but 2024 and beyond, where it's still referred to in any way as
a D.
With a D.
Okay, cool.
And I again, those slow changes. Those slow changes.
Well, yeah. And people, it's like calling something a Band-Aid or a Kleenex. Those are brand names, and we're just used to it. So when the PTSD thing, when it was first, we're all used to the colloquial colloquialisms, and so it just rolls off our tongue. No, we got it. And so you're right, making that change. But anyway, I've got strong opinions, but I really try to be open-minded to hear if am I off base, and if I need to make some corrections, okay, let's have a conversation. Tell me where I'm off, or and see, maybe I've changed my mind, and there's been times like, no, I'm good. You haven't convinced me. So, but yeah, next, yeah. So, and that's just kind of how things went, and that's how the career went.
Well, we're talking about health.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to segue into your exit.
Okay.
You're actually my first guest who had to leave any of these careers.
Sure.
Veteran, first responder, because you didn't want to take the COVID vaccine.
Sure.
That, I think, is the nutshell. What I'm going to do is I'll give you the floor to explain the process of what happened with you, your organization, and how it ended up. Okay.
So I want to be very respectful of not pushing my political or value system on anybody else. So I'm going to do, if I pause while we're talking about this, it's because I want to make sure that I want to respect you. I want to respect your platform, and I also want to respect your audience and theirs. We may agree to disagree, but this is just my experience. So I'm going to do my best to do this this way. So
before you get going,
yes.
Would you like me to set the table and give you my experience with? I feel like I want to already kind of put where I'm at with it.
Sure.
In the sense of I'm not looking for this to be a debate. I'm gonna lay the table out.
Sure.
I lived and worked here in Riverside County.
Okay.
We were in an amazing bubble.
Sure.
Never once did it even get put on the table of you have to.
Sure. Okay.
Never had to face that.
Okay.
For the most part, there weren't even mask enforcement.
Right.
So when we didn't leave Riverside County, you really didn't recognize it too much.
Sure.
I have an India casino that is a stone's throw from my house, never shut down.
Right.
So there was always the opportunity to go have dinner, go do something.
Yep.
On top of it, because of the masks that they were not enforcing, but they were offering in there, the best thing is you couldn't smoke in the casino anymore. So it was real nice to walk through this casino without smoking cigarettes.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I have family that lives in LA County. LA County was probably one of the most restrictive counties here in Southern California.
Okay.
You realized the difference when you went into that county and you'd go visit them. I can't even walk in the store, need a mask kind of deal. For me, it was never a big deal. You want me to put a mask on so I could come in? For me, my time was more important. I need to go get a damn gallon of milk. If it's going to save me, time to just go in, I'll put the mask on. Sure. It's my mindset.
Sure.
My family, we go to New York City on average every other year.
Okay.
We were taking my mother-in-law for her first time.
Wow.
In 2022.
Okay.
My wife and I are like, we are not going to prevent mom from being able to go see everything that New York has to offer. We got vaccinated.
Okay.
Because it goes back to, I wasn't going to have my ability to do what I wanted to do hampered.
Right.
The flip side to that, it was a crock of garbage because you'd pull out the vaccination card and they wouldn't even look at it.
Right.
So I'm just kind of setting the table where I come from.
Okay, cool. And for the people that wanted the vaccine and still want
sponsorship for this podcast comes from Brothers in Arms USA. They're a veteran-owned and operated clothing and accessories brand that's 100% American-made. Every piece tells a story of brotherhood, respect, discipline, and honor, deeply inspired by those who serve, those who have served, and those who have paid the ultimate price serving our great country. Whether you're an outdoor enthusiast, a proud patriot, or simply somebody who values high-quality American craftsmanship, they've got something for you. Go check out brothersinarms.com, spelled out fully, brothersandarms.com, and use the promo code TRANSITION20 to get 20% off your purchase.
There are going to be people that skewer me for calling it a vaccine. It is a differently formulated product that was never done in that nature before, prior to this, and the definition of vaccine was changed in order to allow this in to be called a vaccine. So our take on it, if somebody wants the shot, God bless you, go get it. On a personal note, my big rub is that I just think that the people making it should have been very transparent about what their test results were, and we're seeing that they were lying. I mean, it just made it in front of the Senate. This is I don't want to go political with this, and that's. But there's aspects of it that were politically driven. Mm-hmm. And so I really want to be very respectful of different people's values on this. So I'm a Christian. I have been a Christian since I was a child. And I've tried to live a good Christian life. I love Jesus. I still cuss now and again. I haven't been perfect. Now, the thing is that when these shots were introduced, they were developed quickly. There was a lot of standards testing protocols that were waived in order to give them emergency use authorizations. And then when I learned that the shots were developed, all of the shots that were available were developed using tissue from aborted fetuses, I'm not okay with that. For me, for this person, that's a hard no. I'm not okay with that. I just don't think that's okay. Now, everybody else can have their opinion, and that's fine. But just because I have that particular perspective doesn't mean that that's... There might be other reasons why I think I didn't want a shot, but that particular reason, because of my theological beliefs, that objection is actually protected by law. And so we're dealing with the governor of Washington, then Jay Inslee, came out with a mandate the first few days of August of 21. I think it was August 8th. It could be August 9th, give or take a couple of days. And the day of or the day after, then Mayor Jenny Durkin of City of Seattle came out with her own Mayoral Directive Number 9. And in Mayoral Directive Number 9, it says if you are in this certain class of employees, you must have the shot sequence done by this date, or you have to mask and test on a daily basis. All right, I'll mask and test. Fine. I don't want the shot. I'd already had COVID, recovered from it just fine.
I think every one of us had COVID during COVID.
I think so. But some people were asymptomatic. I actually have a friend that doesn't even show antibodies, which is odd. And he never had a shot. To his knowledge, he never had symptoms. He never had it. So there's probably the really odd outlier out there that maybe had some sort of even the bubonic plague, there were people that didn't get symptomatic, right? So anyway, so on October 18th was the deadline to have all of your shots have full efficacy for you to remain employed. There was about 70 of us that were suspended And they didn't use the word suspended, but they pulled us off of duty, and it was unpaid leave. So while we still may have collected a paycheck, we were burning our accrued leave balances, whether it was compensation time, sick leave, or vacation time, or something like that. So you still got a paycheck. You still had while they figured out what they were going to do. Now, shortly after that October 18th deadline, there was 4 or 5 people that I'm going to use the word relented, but maybe they changed their position and they went and they got their shot sequence, and the city, they worked with them on and brought them back. So the number of people my suspicion of what that happened is I think that small group of people thought that the city would balk and just, okay, fine, we're going to lose that many people. We're not going to do it. But they weren't willing to walk away from their careers or their jobs. And
in their defense, like we talked about earlier before we start recording, that independent thinking, that's their decision. They chose it.
Yep.
They can do, in my opinion, they could do whatever they want.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they went left after being right. And I only use that as a terminology of turning.
Correct. They went one way and they changed course.
Correct.
Not a left-right political thing, but yes, right. Let's want to be very clear about that. So that leaves us with about 65, 68 people, because I don't have the exact numbers. It was right about 70. It might have been 68. It might have been 72 that originally got pulled off the line. Sorry. And there might have been, I think there was 4 or 5 that I can think of off the top of my head that went in. Now, interestingly enough, we have, well, we'll come back to that later. There might be a more appropriate time to bring that in. So I was processed out. And I had a Loudermill hearing, which for people that don't know, Loudermill is the last name of a guy who was the first guy that this happened. And it's a union-based process where somebody who is about to be terminated has the right to have a conversation one-on-one with the person who has the ability to fire them or not fire them. So in that case, you get a meeting with the fire chief. And so my Loudermill hearing was scheduled for November, I think 17th or 18th, which was a Wednesday of 2021. And at the conclusion of the meeting, it was like, no, you're still going to be terminated. The termination will be effective at the end of 3 business days from now. So my last day as a firefighter for the city of Seattle was end of business on November 22nd of 2021. At every juncture, now, I submitted the paperwork that said, hey, I am requesting a religious exemption based on this criteria. The shots that were developed all used tissue from aborted fetuses. That exemption was accepted. It wasn't challenged. It was not, okay, it's accepted. Okay. And then they said, we may or may not accommodate you. Okay, because accepting your exemption apparently is different than accommodation. Now, since then, there have been a number of court cases that have been brought forth. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to do my best job summing some things up. In a civil suit, or a suit like this, an employment suit, you can say, hey, it's a facial challenge. Now, the facial challenge is, hey, you can't do this. Whatever this is, we'll just call it X. You can't do X. And that's one way to challenge it. That's a facial challenge. The other way to challenge it is called an as-applied challenge. And the as-applied challenge is, well, we're not necessarily saying you can't do X, but we're saying how you did X was wrong. You didn't do it correctly. Now, in the beginning, there was a number of organizations that filed lawsuits on the facial challenges for the vaccine mandates. Most of those got tossed out. Our attorney, after being fired, we organized, and a group that started out as 39 of us, we filed a federal lawsuit, in federal court. Our attorney did on our behalf. And this is very much a David versus Goliath type of a situation. We are fighting a municipality that has virtually unlimited tax dollars. And because our law firm is very small, I think they've got like five employees. They do not have the resources to go full contingency. So we're paying as we go. And a lot of us lost everything, or lost a lot. My wife and I, we lost almost everything material with this whole process. And so you got a bunch of people that are not broke, but dang near, paying as we go for a lawsuit with a lawyer. Now, we are making progress. Just the last few weeks, we have entered into the discovery phase of our lawsuit. This is where I show you mine, you show me yours. For people that don't know, we show the evidence, we produce the evidence of our side of what our claims are, and then the people that we have filed a lawsuit against, they show the evidence of what they have, of why they think that they were justified or okay doing what they did. And so that's where we sit with this. Now, in this phase is when depositions happen, and depositions any kind of a civil lawsuit, depositions are incredibly expensive. So that's just kind of where we're at with that. Now, we got in February of 23, the vaccine mandate was actually lifted by the city of Seattle. And they have not invited people back. There have been people that have applied to go back, and those people have been denied. They've been playing games. No, don't talk to us. Talk to our lawyers. Well, we're not going to give you an answer on that. We were told when we were terminated that we were being terminated with a designation of a non-disciplinary separation, but it wasn't of our own volition. Now, some people chose to resign under duress. They had their reasons for it. Some people chose, no, I'm not going to give you a resignation. You're going to have to fire me because I don't think I'm in the wrong on this. And in the beginning, they were saying, yeah, it's non-disciplinary, so it's not for cause. Problem is that Washington state law codified says it's 41.08.080, I think, or 090, says that you cannot fire a firefighter not for cause. It can only be for cause. Now, in the past, there have been people that have been terminated because they did a felony. They did something really, really bad, and they're in jail.
Right.
The occasional bad apples. That's a different story. That's fired for cause. We weren't derelict. Good gosh, I was nominated for Firefighter of the Year in 2018 or 2019. I got the bloody letter. I was doing good. I was a high performer. And so now, one of the things that's kind of interesting, a little bit of a sidebar, and it's actually happening kind of in your neck of the woods here, is there is a case currently in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Well, no, it went to the Ninth. The Ninth ruled on it and kicked it back down to the district court and told the district court that they have to try it. And that is it's against the LA Unified School District, LAUSD. That is the first of its kind that I'm aware of. It is actually where the Ninth Circuit Court specifically in their reverse and remand down, their overturn and remand, they said that the plaintiff will get the opportunity to prove, not that they have proven, but they will get the opportunity to prove that the COVID-19 shots were a medical treatment, that they were not a sterilizing vaccine. And if that's the case, that opens the doors for some pretty big stuff, because now medical treatment has already been ruled in case law that it can't be mandated. You can't mandate a medical treatment. So we're in a fight. We're in a fight for our futures, because people, when you're fired from being a firefighter, if you go look for a job for anybody else, people know you don't get fired unless you did something really, really heinous. So wait, were you fired? Well, so then that opened the can of worms of, okay, we went back to Human Resources Department. Hey, were we fired for cause? No, you weren't fired for cause. So I need that letter so I can take it to a prospective employer and say, I was not fired for cause. Well, what were we fired for? Well, wait, you can't fire us not for cause. And then we have the HR person who is the head of HR for the fire department saying, no, you were fired for, trying to argue in front of the Public Safety Civil Service Commission that no, they were fired for cause. Really? Well, where's the rule? Because it's not. We have it in their handwriting or in their communications. Basically, we have them dead to rights with their own writings, their own rules about. They broke so many rules about, they did not have an individualized interactive process. They were supposed to. And I've got to be, to a degree, I've got to be somewhat careful what we talk about here because this is an active litigation. So what I'm trying to do is share what I can that's publicly findable. I can't, out of respect for our attorneys, I don't want to disclose any tactics or anything that they're doing, right? But what we, because it's in discovery, we've submitted them. Here's the banker's box full of documents that we have. We have them dead to rights. It's just, the thing is right now what they're doing is they're playing the outlast game, and they're having us do, that giant circle jerk where hey, go do this, go get this, go get that. And the city has contracted with outside counsel, a very large, high profile Chicago-based law firm, and they've got an unlimited budget, and it shows. So that's kind of where things sit. Now, what we have, if I have your permission, we do have a website. We are, it's called Seattle Fired. It's rudimentary. We are not web designers. It's going to show if you go visit it. But if people, we're trying to get the word out. We would love if people wanted to donate to help us fund our legal expenses. We have filed for a nonprofit in Washington. We've received that. We have submitted the paperwork for a tax exempt. So when we get confirmation of that, because that's what the IRS, then we can offer a receipt for people and provide and demonstrate that, hey, it's a tax deduction for people that wish to donate to support our cause. And again, I'm not trying to say, I have my own personal opinions about the vaccine or the shots, but I believe more strongly in everybody's individual right to choose for themselves what they want to do and how they want to move forward. So it's been decimating for a lot of people. We have one person who was a lieutenant in our fire department. He up and moved he uprooted his family, and he's got a family with young kids. He's living in a Terry travel trailer in Virginia and is on a fire department there trying to reestablish his career there. But he's living in a Terry travel trailer with kids. One of our people, she was without a house for a while and living in a car with her daughter. My wife and I lost almost everything material, almost everything. Now, what I can say is that my marriage is strong. My faith is strong. My relationship with my two, adult sons is awesome. We chose, we haven't hit it in this conversation, at least on recording. When that happened, we stayed in the Seattle area for about 6 months, but we saw what we perceived was handwriting on the wall saying, hey, look, there's vaccine passports. You can't go into so much as a Starbucks to go get without looking at a passport. You talked about that, but that turned out, at least here, it sounds like it turned out to be more of a ruse than actual.
We never had a display here. It was when we were in New York.
Oh, it's New York. Okay.
Yeah, we would be going into a restaurant or something, and
okay.
At the end of the day, I think a lot of people, they got inundated with it.
Sure.
And it becomes tedious.
Yeah.
And so when you've got a line of 10 people coming through the door and the 10th person is pulling out a white card, come on in.
Yeah.
Come on in.
100%. Right. And so now, interestingly enough, this would be a great time to segue into that other thing. On October 17th and 18th, there were piles of real, authentic vaccination cards that were unfilled out, sitting on the watch desks at more than one very busy station in the Seattle Fire Department. We know that a large number of people submitted real vaccination cards fraudulently. That was brought up to the chief by one of our members during his Loudermill hearing. And the chief is on record saying, yeah, that's not my problem. And it's like, wait a minute here. So those of us that acted with integrity. Now, the integrity aspect is I'm not lying and saying I got a shot when I didn't. That we're being punished, and the people that grabbed these cards and submitted them so they didn't, they're not. And it was negotiated by our local, our union, that would be a fireable offense. So no discipline matrix, no buildup of discipline. It's like, no, if you submit a fake card, you're a fraudulent. Because it's kind of nuanced. They're not fake cards. They're actual real cards. And the reason that these things happened is that the Seattle Fire Department was actually running the vaccine sites when they were initially spooled up. So you'd go through the line, and the person giving you the shot in the arm would be a Seattle firefighter that had been trained and, okay, fine, and you're doing it. So they're in there, they're wearing their mask and their thing, and they're doing safety procedures. And so there are, I think they're reasonably confirmed. We have reports of people that said to come through my line and they'd squirt it onto the floor and hand you your card. And that's beyond. And so these are cards that have batch numbers on them, lot numbers on them of this is what you got. And so we're kind of like, do we play that card with those people that we know, or do we not? We don't want to look. These are our friends. Do you want to burn a friend? Do you want to be a snitch? Part of me, the vindictive part of me, because I have that streak, wants to say, yeah, it's not vindictive against my friends. It's I want accountability. And the accountability is, why didn't you do the vetting process up front? If you say that this is to save lives, if it's so important because people are going to die, because that's the message that we were fed, is that if you don't get this shot sequence, people are going to die. Well, if it's that dire and you don't have the value to vet that process, we're seeing, there's an integrity gap in that right there. Right, saying one thing and doing something and behaving a very, very different way. So yeah, we're in a fight, and it's our union. Interestingly enough, I'll confess I've never been a giant union guy, but the whole time I was with the fire department, I paid my union dues. I attended occasional meetings, not very often. I voted when there was a vote. I did my good effort to research, so I knew I was voting what I was voting for on the vote. And when the contracts were coming up, I was hey, read through it, look at the changes. Do I think it's a good idea? And then when we'd sit around that kitchen table, that beanery table, hey, I think this is a good plan. Maybe I don't like this detail. Maybe I do like that detail. But this is what I think on this one. I think we should vote for it. I think we shouldn't. And we're having those conversations. So I was engaged at that level. When this whole mandate came out, the union, they had to call special meetings because the people were like up in arms, like, dude, you need to, and you had some people standing up there screaming and yelling that we need to have a vax mandate. And if you're not vaxxed, you need to be fired. From
within your organization?
From within our organization. We had certain people. Now, I do want to share that these were typically the people that, maybe I shouldn't share it because it gets into politics. I won't share it.
Well, what I was gonna rebut to where I felt you were going is, regardless of what the person's deciding factors were, they came down on the side that they believed that there was validity to getting the injection.
Sure. Yes.
So
absolutely.
Going back to like we talked about, everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
100%. Now, here's one of the things that's an interesting rub. We did at the union site, at the local site, or at the local level, we followed Robert's Rules of Order, and a vote was requested. And so a vote happened. And it was framed as such. Should Local 27, should they support the mandate, or should they argue against the mandate? Not the shots, but the mandate. A supermajority came back. Local 27 should fight the mandate.
Now, is Local 27 the entire Seattle Fire Department?
Correct.
Okay.
No, well, it is. Great question. 27 is captains and down.
Okay.
Captains and down. And 2898 is the chiefs union, which is battalion chiefs, deputy chiefs, and assistant chiefs. The chief doesn't have his union.
So within the Seattle Fire Department, you don't change bargaining group until you get to deputy chief?
No, until you leave captain and enter battalion chief.
Battalion chief.
Yes. So, and largely the chiefs union follows. They're usually just a few months behind and basically mirror what the local 27. The local 27 has been ceded an enormous amount of authority by the city. So with the supermajority command, of the leadership saying, hey, no, you have to go do, you have to advocate for this. Regardless of what the union president's personal opinion is, he has a fiduciary responsibility to his members to follow the marching orders of his members. And they didn't, because every single local that I'm aware of in Washington, I could be wrong, but everyone that I'm aware of, where the union stood up to the governor's mandate, the union prevailed and the mandate did not happen. Meaning people were not fired. They may have been hey, you got to wear a mask, you got to take a test every day. Fine. We were willing to do that. We were willing to follow the mayor's directive number 9, which says either take your shot sequence or you will mask and test every day. Now, it's every day that you work. As a firefighter, we're on a different schedule, but fine. You can stick a swab up my nose. I'll take a test. And if it comes back hot, I'll go home and I'll deal with that with my sick leave or whatever I have to do. And so, yeah, one of the interesting things is in this conversation, there are people that were pro-mandate that point to the Jacobson Supreme Court case back from I think it's 1905. Don't quote me on the year, but it's the Jacobson case and it's surrounding smallpox. And they say, hey, the Supreme Court said that you can mandate a vaccine. And I go, yeah, but you got to read the whole ruling. Smallpox had a 30% mortality rate. 30%, not a less than 1%. The vaccine was actually a sterilizing vaccine. It stopped it. And by the time that this went into effect, we had breakthrough cases documented in our fire department. In September, 9 of the 11 people that were out with COVID positive tests had already submitted proof of COVID vaccination sequence. So, okay, even in our own department, we had breakthrough cases. And the final part of the Jacobson ruling says, or you can pay a $5 fine, which adjusted for inflation would be something around $200 in 2021. Okay, I'll pay the fine. I'll rule with the Supreme Court ruling. For the sake of charity in the conversation, I will allow, personally, I will give you, okay, fine, it's not a sterilizing vaccine, it's not supremely effective, and I won't hold you to the mortality comparisons. I'll pay $500 fine. And I'll submit to wearing a mask and taking a COVID test every day when I come into work. And that was all denied. It was, no, it's not going to happen. And then within a few days, or a few weeks of us being pulled off the line, when supposedly, now we've already discussed that there's a lot of people, there's a rampant fraudulently submitted card issue. But throughout December, and I think it went into January, they had a ridiculous amount of people that were off on a COVID exposure that went through the entire department.
I don't normally give admonitions, but I'm just going to throw in there. Yeah. That's purely your take on this. I'm going to say that everything you're saying, yes, I'm not jumping in because a lot of it I just don't know.
Right.
The allegations of the fraudulent submission of a valid card.
Yes.
That's between those people in Seattle Fire Department, in my opinion. Okay. If you guys want to make that part of your case, that's on you. Oh, yeah. I'm just saying, I don't want somebody listening thinking that because I'm not saying anything, I'm buying what you're saying. I'm not saying you're lying. I'm not. That's between them and the Seattle Fire Department.
And that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I can agree to disagree with most things. Now, what I have shared with you is facts. Now, the fact being, we have people attesting to stacks of cards. That's an attestable fact.
Got it.
We have the fact of 9 of the 11 people in September that were off on COVID positive tests had submitted proof of vaccination. Those are the facts. And the other stuff that I've dealt with the legal details that I've shared, those are all facts. And then anybody who wants to look up, I mean, when the stuff gets submitted to the courts, it's you can go get it. It's public information, especially since we're dealing with a public entity. It's not like a private entity is we're not suing a private organization. And now, just to be a good sport about this, I think that if you're a private employer, and the laws are very, very clear that if you're a private employer, you have an enormous amount more latitude about what you can require of your employees. But when you're a government employee, when you are the government and you're a public employer, the laws are incredibly strict about what you can and can't do. And what we have is our attorneys. I want to say this so that it's factual. Our attorneys have cited WALAD, which is Washington Laws Against Discrimination, as part of which are in Federal Title VII, which is I'm sorry, I'm having a brain cramp. Basically, it's the laws at those different levels that talk about you can't discriminate, and so yeah, it's and the reason the discrimination comes into the effect is that these are people. Now there are a couple of people that did not submit religious paperwork that said, no, I'm standing on the Constitution. You don't get to ask that question, and gave him a middle finger. But by the way the laws are written, it's looking like we're tracking reasonably well. I think quite well.
My 2 cents on the whole thing again, and that's why I forgot how to talk. I think that's why I wanted to lay the groundwork of where I come from on this situation. I am thankful every day that I never actually got put into the choose or not choose.
Right. Absolutely.
Line.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
The problem that I have the biggest issue with personally.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to give you a reason. I shouldn't have to pull the religion card. I shouldn't have to pull the sports card. I shouldn't have to pull the fact that I read Harry Potter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't want to take it.
Agreed.
Now, if you're going to stand your ground and say, all right, this is a mandate, then where I push this off, then that becomes a group like yours. Right. All right. I, again, fall back to I am very fortunate that I was not put in the situation to choose. To choose in the sense of this or your job.
Right. And my heart breaks. I have friends that are still working there that I believe that they actually did take a shot sequence, and they're showing back up at work, and they're like in tears. They're like, I did this to save my job because I don't know any other way to support my family. And it's funny because we're going to close that loop, but start at the beginning of our conversation is when it became clear that the city was telling us we were going to have to make that choice, take the jab or lose your job. My wife and I had several very long, very careful conversations about, honey, I have the skills to provide for our family. I had a fair amount of the tools. I have remodeled houses, even though I'd never
remodeled motorhomes,
house, even while I was doing my career as a firefighter. I've remodeled homes. I've done side jobs. I've helped out friends. I've never pulled my toe fully out of that pool.
You guys are the poster children for side hustles during your careers.
Yeah, we have been. And if you ever see a wealthy firefighter, it's not because they only worked at their fire department job. They either married a lady who made a lot of money, which awesome, great, or they had a side hustle or four. And the nice thing about that is that when you have that, the firefighter job, you have your health insurance, you have, your retirement, whatever retirement system you have, which could be a pension, it could be something. You have those, and you got a steady paycheck that comes in and out. Now, guys get stupid and they set their budgets up for, including, to require overtime or that side hustle. And
no, but everybody lives within their means in these professions.
Well, and that was one of the things that
everybody needs a new truck every year.
Right. So, when my wife and I got married, it was 2014. We'd been dating for a year. And we had each been through a divorce. Neither one of us are proud of that, but we both, we talked about that very openly in our initial first dates and getting to know one another, because neither one of us wanted to sign up to a quitter. And so we wanted to find a new partner that was committed to making it work. And I'm not saying, when I say this, I have zero judgment against people that have more, that have had one divorce or 5. This is just what we were trying to do for us.
Thank God you're not throwing out judgment.
No judgment. We were reading books about how to be better spouses. We were reading books about how to be better. I had to learn how to be a parent instantly, because our sons were 9 and 11 when we got married. They were 8 and 10 when we met, and so I'm like crash course on how do I be a dad, and not mess it up. So, but we both brought in financial baggage, negative financial baggage from our previous situations. And we locked arms and we said, we're going to get through this. And it took us 7 years to do it. We paid off every penny of debt. Neither one of us could qualify for a mortgage at that time because I had a short sale and she had a foreclosure from her first marriage. And we said, we're going to get this cleaned up. Now, I made way more money than she did, but I also had way more stupid debt. So sold the toys, cleaned stuff up. We made our decision, no judgment against different perspectives. We said, hey, can we give our kids a stay-home parent? We did the math. I called up our staffing officer that hires all the overtime. And I said, Carl, I can't hold you to this. What's the projections looking like for the next few years? And he says, we're not keeping up with the retirements. There's going to be more and more and more. Okay. My second job became overtime. Our family's second income became me working overtime. So 6 months after we got married, we brought my wife home from, she was an assistant manager at Starbucks, working 3/4 time, when she was a single mom, supporting 2 kids. The only vacation that we've ever taken was our honeymoon. That's it. And we just we're about to celebrate 11. We're coming up on 11 years. We would take maybe a road trip, a 3-day weekend on a road trip with the family. We lived below our means. We didn't go out to eat. We drove, we paid off our cars, but we didn't buy new ones. She had a Kia that she bought 6 months before she met me that it ended up getting totaled, but it had 150,000 miles on it and we were still driving it. We'd still be driving it if it didn't get totaled. Debris in the road. Thank God I was driving, because it was a lot.
You've got a lot of coffee options out there. You've got a lot of veteran and first responder owned coffee companies as well. Trident Coffee is one of these companies, but they're different. Trident fuels your body and mind with a premium cold brew that's infused with powerful ingredients for performance, focus, and wellness. Made with organic MCT oil, lion's mane, and reishi mushrooms, this isn't just coffee. It's fuel for your brain, ensuring smooth, steady energy with no jitters and no crashes. Plus, the cocoa powder adds antioxidants, and the electrolytes keep you hydrated and balanced. Yes, they are cold brew experts, and their beans are brewed for cold brew optimization. But what does that mean for those of you who also love hot coffee like me? Their coffee tastes amazing, not bitter. So enjoy it hot or iced, mixed into your protein shake, or take it on the go. However you drink it, Trident Coffee is coffee upgraded. Get yours now at tridentcoffee.com and use the promo code TDP15 for 15% off your order. That's TDP15 for 15% off your order. Stay sharp, stay fueled, stay ready.
By the time we got fired, we had paid every debt off. We were at zero, and we had about 80 to 85 in liquid sitting in a bank account, which is about what you'd need to go put a down payment on a house. We weren't quite ready to do that yet because we wanted to have, we were kind of mostly following Dave Ramsey's approach, which is put 6 months of living expenses in reserve. And so it was like, okay, can we keep our foot on the gas and get another X amount for that down payment? But we weren't quite sure but that's just where we're at. And that's all gone. We've had to exhaust what was in our 457B. We you know, we're not living on Visa, but our Visa bills, we have several Visa cards with a lot of money on it, which Dave Ramsey would shoot us for. but it's like, well, we're not living lavish life. We're not buying new clothes. Life costs money. Now we did.
Kids cost money.
Kids cost money. We started out, using the skills that I had earned as a youth. We said, well, I can go back to being a contractor. So now I'm not professing to be an awesome businessman. I had to learn how to run a bloody business and how not to be stupid. I can do great work. But just like you mentioned, the stereotype of the artist that can do amazing work but can't figure out how to make it profitable. Well, I got to make it profitable because this is what's feeding our family. And so,
in a weird way, you have a little bit of sympathy for your dad?
No. That was a difficult relationship up to the day he died.
I'm just talking about the whole not being a good business person or not running the business side of the house the best. Maybe you just didn't learn.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's a fair question. I haven't been asked that, so that was a really quick response, but it's the gut one, and it's probably the most true. But maybe I should have. Maybe I should have more sympathy for him. But one of the things that I find is so interesting is that when I see people in offering a service for sale as their business model, I see a lot of contractors out there that are making they're bringing a lot of money in, but doing a really crappy work. And I'm going, I can't put my name to that. Doing good work takes more time. The challenge is finding the clients that, so, hey, Bob down the street is a handyman. He'll do it for $40 an hour. Great. Well, Bob's retired and he doesn't need it. This is his fishing and beer money. I'm feeding a family with it, and I've seen the work that Bob does, and I'll blow it out of the water. And I'm just hypothetical Bob. I don't have a Bob I'm referring to. But, we, after seeing the handwriting of what we thought the state was going to do, the overall community and culture that we were living in those towns around that, we said, we don't want to be a part of this. So we moved to the Boise, Idaho area. Now, the specific town is Caldwell. We moved to Meridian, which is right next to Boise. And that was 3 years ago this weekend. We had a nice little home. It was working great. But just recently, we realized we needed to move my mother-in-law. She's our last remaining parent between the two of us. Her health is declining. It's going to help her with her finances. My wife can kind of help shepherd her with some of her growing healthcare needs. And it was the right thing to do to honor our parent, and that was to bring her in to live with us. And so in our coordinating for this visit, I mentioned that. So last weekend, I drove an empty U-Haul because you can't get one in Washington. I drove an empty U-Haul from Boise to a little tiny dairy town up by Canada and loaded up my mother-in-law and her stuff. And she now lives with us. So,
speaking of the move and the ongoing court battles, is there any court stuff back in the Seattle area?
Oh yeah, there is. Now at this juncture, we're dealing with stuff where the attorneys can handle it. They don't. If they need some of us, if we need to be present for something, boom. One of the cool things about the whole COVID mess is that a lot of things that used to be required to be done in person, people are willing to do over Zoom or some sort of a video conference. Now, I'm a firm believer that this kind of an interaction, I've seen interviews where it's done over video and it's not the same. This is face to face is still the best way to have a heartfelt, real conversation with any kind of depth. And so we have a trial date set. It's been moved once. It is currently set for February 2nd of 26. So we're 8 months away, 7 months. Yeah, something like that. Hopefully it doesn't get moved again. We want to go. We're our team. We're ready. So we've got a list of the people that we wanted to depose. I don't think it's terribly long. It might be kind of long, but I don't think we're going to need to, because I think we're going to, we'll see. We'll let the attorneys decide that.
With the turnover that a lot of cities encounter, is the administration of the city of Seattle still the same people today as it was back in 21 and into...
Different people, different seats. It's been, different people have changed into some different seats, but the overall theme, perspective, ideology has remained very constant. One of the things that did happen, which I thought was really, the city, right, the fire department right now is so low on staffing, it's crazy. They're shutting down rigs all the time. For people that don't know, and I don't know if you call it this down here, but up there we would call it a brownout. And that was, hey, we don't have enough people on duty today, so we're just going to not staff this unit. And it might be a unit, it might be the whole station. And there's a drawdown matrix that administration comes up with when they put these programs together that said, hey, this station is kind of slow and it's surrounded by a lot of help, so that can get there quick. So this will be maybe the first one that we take out of service, and if we need 4 to make it work and only 2 show up, we'll take those 2 and we'll send them to other places to keep them in service. They've now authorized, which is rare. This is precedent setting for Seattle. I know that there's departments other places that they don't even think about this, but they're now authorizing 72-hour shifts, 72 straight. And I can share with you, if you're at a busy house, 24 is long. 48 is you feel like you got your head caved in with a sledgehammer. 72, oh my goodness. I've seen reports that say that after 24 hours, how you operate a vehicle is equivalent to being legally drunk. Oh, that's not good. So you're having people that are working for 72 hours and they're driving an ambulance or they're driving a fire engine? Excuse me? No. That's not okay. So that's a dangerous precedent. And when you have people from our group that are like, hey, we'll come back. We want to come back. People have been trying to come back. And they're still saying no.
You mentioned that you were 22 years in?
I was a month shy of 22 years. I was, yeah.
If this answer in any way impacts negatively on your case, please don't answer.
Okay.
Could you have just retired?
No.
Okay.
So in Washington, the pension system is called LEF 2 that I am in. And LEF 2 stands for Law Enforcement Officers and Firefighters. It is plan number 2 because there used to be LEF. And then when they created 2, then LEF became LEF 1 and then LEF 2. And one of the things that our trades like to do, our professions like to do when we're retired or whatever, we're sitting around a bar having a beer, is we talk about the nuances of our retirement programs and our benefits. And there's plenty of people that don't like pensions. They think they're stupid or they don't think that they're good. But the bottom line is that was the deal that we signed up with, and just be honorable. You know, I'm not manipulating anything. I signed up for that deal. That's the deal. I was 47 when I got fired. To collect whatever pension you've accrued without a penalty, an actuarial penalty, which is big, you have to be 53. Now, the earliest that I can withdraw is age 50, but I get a significant penalty. My wife and I had a couple of heartfelt conversations with a couple of calculators, and we made the decision that it would, at this juncture of our life where we were financially, we were better off drawing early and taking the penalty than waiting longer and not having a penalty. So those calculations are being factored into our damages claims, and everybody's is different because, you know, the thing is that if you have somebody that's I think the highest rank that we had was a captain. I don't think but anyway, it doesn't really matter. But if somebody was 6 months from their planned retirement date when this happened, the financial impact of this is not that much. For the person now here's the interesting thing. There's one of our guys, in the left 2 system, there's a magic thing that happens when you hit the 20-year mark. It means that now your benefit will have a COLA bump throughout in perpetuity. But if you end service before 20, you don't get that. We've got one of our members is a couple of months shy of 20. And it's just like, oh my heavens, what that does. Now, again, it factors into the calculations for what the damages are for that individual. But we were people that had 4 or 5 years on the department. They get vested, I think, at 5. I think. Don't hold me to that one. I'm probably 20% sure that that's the number. So you get vested reasonably early, but the value of it doesn't grow at,
Right.
So, yeah, we've got a little bit of help from the retirement benefit that I did earn through our pension system. But I already shared with you a few moments ago that maybe foolishly our deferred comp or 457B that's been exhausted. Just trying to, how do we make an adjustment? I mean, starting a business. And
I only asked because I think a lot of people have the mentality that all government jobs, military, first responder, they have that you work 20 years and you get a pension. So that's what sounds like Seattle's just like California. I have a pension, but I could not draw it with California, it was minimum 50.
Okay.
And then it is a formulation based on your total years of service.
Yeah, it's like an 80 thing or something like that. You got to get to the number of 80 years of service plus how old you are or something like that.
No, it's just at 50 years old, you can retire, and then they're going to multiply by how many years of service you've got.
Got it. Okay.
So if you came into the career really late, a lot of people can't even come close to God, I cannot talk. They can't come close to being able to retire at 50 because they don't have enough years in to make it worth anything.
Right.
But it's not a set number of years. It's not at 20 you get your pension.
Correct.
At 25 you get your pension.
No, it's not. We have to be a certain age to be able to, and I could pull it at 50, and I did. And I just turned 50 in October. So the first month you're eligible to collect anything is the first full month following you turning that year, and they don't pay you till the last day. So my very first pension check hit our bank account this November 29th or 30th or whatever the last business day of November was.
But for most men and women in Washington, primarily Seattle Fire, it's 53 is kind of the minimum retirement age.
53 is what people target before you can retire without a penalty.
Got it.
So now, if I don't know the nuances of it, if you retire from a disability, there's different rules.
Of course.
And that's one of those things that you've had a number of guests that talk about finances, and this is a great opportunity to touch on that. And that is if you do a full career and you retire when you want to, because it's the time you said, hey, I'm ready. And ready could be health, it could be finances, it could be I'm done. And you're going to go fishing, or you're going to go skiing, or you're going to go hiking, whatever you're going to go do. But you no longer need to worry about an income because you've handled that. That's a certain group of people, right? That get to do that. Some people do the military, and so their transition.
I'd be willing to bet between our two professions, first responder and veteran, that portion who's done everything right, and they come to that point where they just retire and go do nothing, that's a very small number.
And sadly, divorces are a big part of that, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things I'll use that as an opportunity to plug. Find a group of people that can help you learn how to be a better spouse and do that. I got introduced to a group called Stronger Families. I don't know if you've heard of them, if they've crossed your path, but they do a faith neutral program, and they travel around the country doing seminars for couples, teaching them how to the program is designed for people that are first responders, and it was derived from a DoD program that they did, a program they developed for the DoD, because they recognized that people in our professions have a unique set of strains on a relationship. And so, hey, how can we, now the people that founded it, clearly they're big supporters of marriage. But they say, hey, how can we help give these people resources and say thank you to them for their service by helping them not have failed marriages, which is awesome. So anybody who comes across that, tremendous organization. Can't say enough great things about them. But so when you got one group that gets to leave when they're ready on their terms, then you have the other group of people that might be that go out. This is going to be more military. You did 5 years, you did 10 years, you did something, but you're getting out on your time frame. But you know that your income isn't done. You still need to make a transition to some other form of income generating, right? Like full time, because you're not even in retirement where you need some income, but it's reduced. Then you have the group. Now this is a really small group, but you have the group that have some form of a disability. They don't leave on their own time, but they experience an injury on duty, and fortunately, it probably should be more, but fortunately for them, there is a benefit system in place that, hey, if you can no longer do this job, you're not going to just get stuck with, $800 a month because that's all the benefit you've accrued, because it recognizes, no, you incurred this disability while doing your job. We owe you more than just that. Okay. And then we're in this weird little fourth group that in the past was the really small number of people that were felons. The people that behaved very poorly, did something really, really heinous, and they got a felony. Your profession, my profession, the military, they've all had a very small number of people that have behaved that way. And they are removed. They don't get that disability. We're now fired. How do we figure that out? How do we navigate that? How do you, oh my gosh, because even if you're in that second category and you're going, hey, the few of us, because we probably know I know a couple of people that did 10 years in the fire department. They said, you know what, this just isn't for me. I'm going to transition out and I'm going to go do something else. Well, those people got their businesses up and running while they were still firefighters. Maybe they went to a slow station and they started their mortgage banking business or something like that while they were there. And then yep, that income's taken over. I'm popping smoke. I'm out. Well, for us, it's like, hey, you had very little warning. And there was no severance. There was no thanks. It wasn't just we were ignored. We were actively discarded, actively treated like we were undesirables. And I want to be really clear. This isn't limited just to the city of Seattle. This happened in a lot of places. There's a number of cities in and around the Seattle area that followed suit. I think that there were some places that were in and around Southern California here. I don't want to be disrespectful, but for somebody who's never really been to California, this whole area is LA, right? That's not fair to San Diego and Temecula and other places, but and then there's some San Francisco, New York had some. Those are places that I'm aware of. We are starting to see, kind of dipping our toe back into the legal things. We're starting to see people winning. There was a lady private industry, Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's a lady back in Michigan that just won $12 million on stuff. The BART employees, Bay Area Rapid Transit employees, a few months ago, they won their wrongful dismissal stuff. It's happening more and more. We have people in our group that are they're dedicated. They have feelers, automatic alerts that pop up, and they basically post every one of these things. The case, it's called the Bacon case because it's the last name of one of the lead plaintiffs in the Spokane Fire Department. That went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and originally it was dismissed at the trial court level, district court, and then they happened to be represented by our attorney. Our attorney argued in front of the Ninth, prevailed. And not only was it remanded and you will try it, they kind of gave the judge a spanking. Again, I didn't go to law school, but the verbiage in it is like, not only will you hear it, you're going to hear it with this perspective. And when I hear that as, oh, good, Dad just spoke, right? And so those are some of the things that we're seeing happening. The Groff v. DeJoy decision that was decided by the Supreme Court, on the surface, it wouldn't think it would apply to us, but it dealt with undue burden and religious exemptions. Now, that was a postal worker who didn't want to work on Sundays, which is why he chose to be a postal worker, because they didn't deliver the mail on Sunday. So he figured when he started his career, I can observe my religious beliefs and I'll never have to work on Sunday, no problem. Well, they picked up an Amazon contract, his local post office. And for a while, he would like do shift trades with people when he would get scheduled for Sundays and try to, and then it was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to transfer to a different post office that doesn't have a Amazon contract yet. And so he did that. And then that one picked up an Amazon contract. And so I believe he ended up resigning. I don't think he was fired, but I think he ended up resigning. But that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court clarified the Hardin decision, which was Hardin, I think it was against TWA years ago.
For the really young people listening, that's an airline.
Yeah, that is now defunct. Probably got bought out by somebody. Trans World Airlines. And it's when they clarified the Hardin, the Ninth Circuit decision was dropped within hours of the Groff the Supreme Court decision. So I'm thinking they had to have been in communication, because they're not going to, lower courts don't want their stuff overturned. They want to follow, they want their stuff to be upheld. So just kind of the nuances, and I have no inside information. I'm just reading tea leaves here. But how that went, it said, you have to use the least restrictive means when you're dealing with evaluating accommodations. Now, in legal terms, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm relaying what our lawyers told us. What that means is they could have suspended us without pay and not fired us. That's less restrictive. They could have kept us on the books, paid us, just a suspension with pay. That's less restrictive. The absolute most restrictive they could have done was to fire us. And so when you have that standard, when that decision got dropped, our attorney was like, no, dude, we were hoping for a good decision. The way that they worded it, it's the best possible decision they could have worded. Like, wow, awesome, great. So they didn't overturn it. They didn't throw it out. And they said no, because depending on how, and I don't understand the nuances of this, but depending on how a court overturns or reviews or something like that, a previous decision, depending on the wording they use, it can actually nullify previous rulings. And so they weren't nullifying anything that's already been, they were just clarifying, no, you actually have a responsibility to interpret it this way. And that's how it needs to be interpreted. So we're pretty confident in, at least that's how that's looking. Now, when you're dealing with, here in California, we're under the Ninth Circuit for that level of court. Depending on how, when you go to that level of appeal court, it's the judges that you get. It's a 3-judge panel that is drawn at random, so you don't know which 3 you're going to get. The ones that we drew at Bacon were terrific. One of the judges, I wasn't there at that hearing, but one of the judges, when our attorney was arguing it, was like, "What? They didn't bring everybody back?" The public doesn't. A lot of the public is unaware, and a judge is. I mean, they're a judge, but they're part of the public. But you'd think that they'd be a little bit more informed, as being a public servant like that, about those kind of policies. But when one of those judges go, What, they didn't bring everybody back? No, Judge, they didn't. So I think what we have to do is I said it before, this is a David versus a Goliath example. We are willing to go fight that giant. We'll take the lumps. We just need the 5 smooth stones. And that's the thing. We've got the sling. We've got the facts. We have the information. Our complaint, which is the fancy word for the lawsuit, that when you actually file a lawsuit, it had, I think it began with 9, like almost points, items. In legal process, whoever the plaintiff is, they list as many possible items as they can. On occasion, 1 or 2 of them might be like throwing mud on a wall. I don't think ours were, but and then the defense, whoever's receiving that complaint, they go systematically try to disprove, hey, this one should be thrown out, that one should be thrown out, this one should be thrown out. And I think we've got 6 or 7 that are moving forward.
You mentioned, here in California, you mentioned BART.
Yes.
Is that their police department?
Bay Area Rapid Transit. I think it was like employees for the light rail, their surface light rail, I think.
Because they also have a law enforcement component. My naiveness is because I'm not involved in this.
Yeah.
But I would assume there'd be a lot more organizations and agencies that are in these battles. And I would have also assumed that they would have all probably been resolved by this point.
Well, statute of limitations is 3 years. So anybody who hasn't filed something within 3 years of the last event, which would have been them being terminated, they might be done.
What I'm getting, where I was going with it is, are you aware of any cities that have been in the same situation and have come to a resolution?
There's been some. I don't have the list off the top of my head. We have people that are tracking it and kind of paying attention because it matters. I mean, how those, precedences and how things are happening are things that are constantly referenced. We've got binding arbitrations have happened. And the thing is that our lawyer tells us that a lot of this stuff gets settled pre-trial. And so I've under the impression, he said, and I don't understand the nuances of this, he says, not every path requires mediation. He says, our particular path for my group, mediation is required. I don't know if that's something that the judge says or if both sides do. He's excited about that. He says, I think mediation's a good thing. He said, but, ultimately he's operating in the best interest of his clients. Now, we are a mass tort. We are not a class action because the differences in damages is too different between, that person with 4 years in versus the person who was going to retire in 6 months. The damages difference is significant. So, class actions is when everybody has the same Ford Explorer that the engine blows up, everybody gets a new engine. So the damages are theoretically very similar. So we're not a class action. There's been some people wondering if, no, I think it was a different topic. So, but yeah, it's,
well, and along those same lines, from the peripheral feel that the country's come to,
sure,
it seems like there has been, I'll call resolution to a lot of this.
Yeah.
In turn, and this is just kind of a weird thought in my head.
Yeah.
A bigger law firm hasn't said, wait a minute, City of Seattle's still fighting this? Let's jump on, meaning you guys, like haven't jumped in and wanted to take this on?
Well, what we've been told was that a lot of times in these kind of David versus Goliath cases, the small firms are the ones that'll start it. And then right about the time you get to the 5-yard line, a big law firm will want to swoop in, take the credit, push it across the goal line, and then take enormous amounts of funds. Mm-hmm. And okay, fine. When a couple of years ago, our firm sent a representative to a conference. I think it was in Atlanta. Don't hold me on that one, but I think it was in Atlanta. That was dealing with, it was a legal conference for lawyers dealing with opposition to COVID mandates. That's just the general term. And apparently in order to set the tone for the conference, one of the earlier presenters basically said, okay, everybody sit down. I want you to raise your hand if you work at a firm with more than 500 people. No hands. And they did that in big chunks all the way down. 95% of the people, if I'm remembering right, 95% of the people at that conference worked at a firm with like less than 25 people, which is a very small firm. 25 people is not 25 attorneys. 25 people is the receptionist.
Right.
And a fair amount of them had less than 5. So it was, and he said, this is a grassroots thing. So that's why we're having this conference, because you need to work together to help one another, because you don't have an army on your side. Well, you do, but you're not all in the same army.
Speaking of army, this also happened to people on the military side.
Absolutely.
Have you heard of any resolutions with that?
No, I have not. Well, one of the things that love him or hate him, one of the things that President Trump announced is that that everybody who was pushed out over that, their objection, their refusal to take it, would be brought back with back pay. I didn't see the announcement live. I think I've seen a recorded clip of it. I haven't studied it, so I don't want to be misquoting Mr. Trump. But the thing is that, and when that happened, I had a bunch of people text me, so is this going to help you? And it's like, well, it helps us with basically public sentiment, but it doesn't help us because as the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, regardless of who it is, it could be Obama, it could be Clinton, it could be Trump, it could be one of the Bushes, it doesn't matter who it is. They're the commander-in-chief. If the person in that office says we're bringing all the people back, they have that authority. They are the HMFIC of the executive branch and the military, the commander-in-chief of the military. They can make that. They don't need Congress to sign off on it. But the actions were taken against us by the city of Seattle, and they have no authority over the city of Seattle.
I wonder if the president, though, do they have the ultimate authority to also offer the back pay? Would that not need congressional or any type of oversight?
Good question.
I'm just asking a rhetorical question.
Good question.
I could see the president saying, "Hey, all veterans, you could come back." I don't know. Again, like I explained to you this morning at breakfast, I don't follow politics.
Yeah, and I'm cool with that too. I would think that they'd have that he would have that authority, but I'm guessing.
I would just imagine that you and your group are looking for any type of positive reinforcement 100%. that goes in your favor.
Yeah, and we have again. We have a lot of them. There's when I say a lot, there's a gob, and there's more coming up every day. It seems like at least every week we're getting more, and we're keeping a list of these. And the thing is that when these rulings happen, there are some rulings that happened in the 8th Circuit. There was a ruling that happened in the 5th Circuit that the lawyers, when they're submitting briefs to the judge for the judge to make a decision on something, they file it under something called supplemental authority, which is basically saying, hey, you're under the umbrella of the 9th, not the 5th and not the 8th. But just so you know, the 5th and the 8th ruled this way. So if we appeal it, if you don't go our way, that sounds awfully 5th gradish, but you get what I'm saying. If you don't rule the way that we're asking you to rule, we think you should rule, we can appeal it to the 9th. And the thing about that is that the 5th and if the 9th, and this doesn't matter which one it is. It's not like any of those have any higher authority. Then they're all on an even playing field. But if one of those the appellate courts rules differently than another one, the likelihood of that getting kicked up to the SCOTUS is very high, because now it's like, hey, you got two siblings that are disagreeing, and we got to go talk to mom and dad to get it sorted out. And nobody wants that. So when you start to see appellate court at the circuit level starting to make rulings on things, you're getting kind of high, because the only thing above that is the Supreme Court. And so there's and even if it's not necessarily a case about a vax mandate, there could be verbiage in it that's nuanced about, hey, there was one in St. Louis where they talked about it was a lady cop, and she won a case because she was transferred to a different division, same pay. But because the division she was transferred to was lower prestige, there was a intangible value in being transferred to this lower prestige position. She challenged that, saying, no, you discriminated against me on this, that, or the other thing. And she prevailed. And in that ruling, there was some verbiage. Right now, I don't remember. We've read so many cases. I apologize. I can't just rattle this off at you, but I'm also not a lawyer. But there was some verbiage in there that was very supportive to basically outlining, hey, look, you don't get to just arbitrarily change somebody's role. You have to have a compelling reason. And if you don't, and if I understand correctly, part of this, I think she happened to be, I think she was a black female, and I think she was claiming that part of it was a discrimination thing. It may have been gender, it may have been ethnicity. I don't know. It may have been a combination of the two, but even though it was the same pay and it was essentially lateral from an authoritative position, it was a different prestige level. And so it would have implications for her future promotion, which is, how do you quantify that? Right. And so she was able to prevail in that category that no, apparently she had enough information that no, that was a form of discrimination against her. So yeah, then I think that was Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri. So yeah, there was some verbiage in that ruling that I think they tapped for some supplemental authority about, discrimination. And one of the things that we've got we have them on record that they were treating medical exemptions differently than people that were submitting religious exemptions. You can't do that. Law says you can't.
It just goes back to that whole thing of having to provide a justification.
Right.
Is where
totally.
That's where my sticking point is.
I get it. And And so it sucks for the people that for anybody that says, hey, you have to do this thing that goes against your values, whatever they might be. Like we talked about at breakfast. I don't care if you pray to a rock. I don't. But if there is rules that protect you from certain things, those rules should apply evenly. And just because my faith brings me to a point where I'm a hard no on using aborted fetal tissue for the development of things that are going to be used for profit or something like that, or medical advances. I'm not okay with that. I've got my reasons. And I'm willing to articulate that completely. I'm probably going to have to. If they want to depose me, I'm going to have to be ready. I'm ready. That's fine. So
this goes back to my question previously where I said, if this has any type of impact or bearing on your case, please don't answer it. What would your ultimate resolution be? Do you want to go back to being a firefighter, or do you just want to be out from underneath this and basically get financially reimbursed and moved on? What would be the ultimate for you? And if that's not an answer you want to give, I'm perfectly okay with it.
I think it would be. I think the attorneys would be
perfectly okay.
Would recommend that I not answer that one.
Perfectly okay.
So, yeah. Because here's what I can say: it would depend. It's going to depend on a lot of things, But I tell you this much: I loved being a fireman. I was really good at it. Yeah.
I usually like to transition into talking about what you're doing today.
Let's talk about it. What do you want?
But you're not really there because you want to be there. And I don't mean this sarcastically, but I don't really feel that really what you want to do long term. But you've gone back into construction type, remodeling type work.
Right. We are a small, my wife and I, it's a we because we own it. She runs the back end. She does paperwork and I do estimates because she's not there yet. I mean, good gosh, sometimes I think I'm not there at estimates yet. I shouldn't say that because I actually do pretty good estimates, but I give very, very detailed ones. It just takes me a long time. I want to add value. And right now, I can provide for my family by doing this and doing a great job. I have really good customer service attitude and skills. Because I'm a one-man show, I don't have employees. And there's a reason for that. In the Boise market, or there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the big ones being the Boise market, it's very seasonal. So, we got to make hay while the sun shines in the spring, summer, and fall, because even though, look, remodeling your bathroom, I can do it when it's 20 degrees outside. I don't care. And it doesn't snow that much in Boise. It really doesn't. But the thing is that the clients need to be ready and willing to have that work done. And if they're not saying, hey, I want you to do it, then, okay, you're twiddling your thumbs. So
let's be honest. Nobody really wants to remodel a bathroom when it's 20 degrees outside.
Oh, I don't care. Really. That doesn't bother me a bit. I'm inside, I'm working inside. It really does. Now, what people don't want to do is they don't want to tear up their kitchen or their bathroom during the holidays.
Oh, of course not.
Nobody wants a bathroom or kitchen torn up during the holidays.
Of course not.
So yeah, we are, and
we're hosting Thanksgiving. There's porta potties in the driveway.
That's right. So we are, we're working on building our reputation. We're building one. We're building a reputation of good work, great customer service skills. Now, here's the funny thing. Because I give so much customer service on the job I'm working on, the jobs that are kind of in the proverbial pipeline, I'm a little slow to get back to those people because I'm giving my current client, I'm giving him everything I've got. So, yeah. And there's a satisfaction in doing good work, doing solid work. It's ethical work. I don't cut corners. I don't hide stuff.
You cut corners sometimes as long as you've got a good miter.
Good point. I don't take shortcuts. I don't. There are people that will say, "Hey, I'll do that," and if you're not looking, they'll skip that step. And I'm sad because that gives our industry a bad name. But we've got some wonderful reviews. We have a website, and it's, you go to the reviews on the website and people are glowing about us. And I'm very, very thankful. Many of our clients have become friends. And you don't get that without providing really good customer service. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We have some long-term visions, but the long-term visions are going to be somewhat dependent on what happens in the medium game. Short term for me is the next 6 months. Medium game is, 6 months to 2 to 3 years. Long term is a little bit beyond that. What's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years? We don't know. We've got my mother-in-law, and she's important to us, and we want to show her that, and we want to help her as best as we can. I've still got my family that we, that's my relationship with my wife is paramount. Our sons are thriving. They're doing well. But neither one of them are in a position where the vacations, even the cop, he can't afford to move out. He can't. He's saving money like mad, but he can't because they don't pay, $21 or so an hour. You in a place that has a cost of living that's, a
lot more than $21 an hour.
than what $21 an hour will afford, right? So both of our sons have young ladies in their life that are very important to them, and they appear to be heading long-term directions, which is great. So I'm really thankful that our oldest son's girlfriend's father just retired as an LEO. So he's got a terrific mentor in the career there, because I can offer mentorship of kind of civil service in general, but he can offer very, very specific guidance. And he was Union City, up just south. I think it's south of
up in towards the Bay Area.
Yeah,
I believe.
I believe it's south of the Bay, just south of the Bay Area. So he recently retired. We get along great. Love him. He's a great guy, and the whole family. It's fantastic. So. Yeah, the transition is, what are we doing next? We've got so much going on right now. The stage that we are, it's just, we have no vacation plans. There's no trips coming up that we have. We're in survival. We're absolutely in survival mode right now. I'm just thankful that my wife and I are rowing in the same direction, and we don't hit each other with the oars very often. This has been a forging. You don't get a testimony without a test, regardless of what your value system is. You don't get a testimony without a test. And those trials that I've been through, starting, with my father's business, in a sequence of, at 35, 36, in a sequence of 14 days, my first wife came home and said she wanted a divorce. My doctor told me I needed back surgery. And my union said, yeah, we're going to take your tiller job away from you and give it to the other guy over a coin flip. Oh, wow. Thank you. That was great. And those things were, at the moment, they were, gosh, it felt like you did 5 rounds with Mike Tyson as a sparring partner in his heyday. You're just like, which end is up? But survived that, grew from it. Survived the second one, grew from it. Without that sequence, I wouldn't have the amazing family I have now. So I'm incredibly thankful for that. Yeah, it's just, I wish I had something really profound to say. We're in survival mode.
Well, I'll repeat what I said before.
Yeah.
I am fortunate, beyond fortunate, that I was never put in that make a decision, not make a decision scenario.
Breaks my heart. Any
man or woman who's been put in that situation, I truly feel for you.
Absolutely.
And I commend you for having your convictions and sticking to them.
Thank you.
On the same token, I couldn't imagine being in this fight.
Sure.
So I wish you the best with it.
Thank you.
I hope that it prevails. Like you said, it depends on what happens, but it prevails to what's best for you and your family.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think what we're looking for is we're looking for justice, and we're also looking for accountability, because we don't want this to ever happen, be able to happen to anybody, any group, for anything ever again at any time. Because if they can get away with this, what are they going to try next? Like we were talking about over at breakfast a little bit, stuff that we think of as, oh, that's science fiction now. Well, 30 years ago, we're seeing things today that we thought was science fiction then, and go, oh, well, that'll never happen. It's like, well, wait a minute, that's kind of what's happening. And again, I'm not trying to be all tinfoil hatty about it, but it's like, we don't know what the future holds. What I want to do is I want to make sure that at no time in the future, if somebody, I want to make sure all religious beliefs are protected equally. You don't have to have any. Okay, fine. That's still protected. You're protected to not have to have one. But if I don't care if you're a Scientologist, I don't care if you're a Buddhist, I don't care if you're an atheist. Okay. I mean, the spiritual aspect of me cares, but I'm not going to try to force my ideology onto somebody else. I just want to make sure that the line is drawn, that certain things won't be tolerated. It's not okay. And I've shared with you that, and I'm not trying to preach. I'm not trying to push it. I'm a Christian. My prayer is I ask for wisdom. I ask for peace. And I surrender the outcome to my God for his glory, whatever that is. Because that's the long term. So.
The only thing I will add to that, and
Please.
At my core,
Yeah.
I am an extremely independent person.
Sure.
The only thing that kind of struck me when you said that,
Yes.
I get the fact you're protecting your right to have your faith and your beliefs.
Yeah.
You made mention that if nobody has a religious beliefs,
Sure.
that's their prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
My only thing is set a precedent where you don't have to choose based on if you're religious or not. Where I'm going with this is don't set a precedent that now anybody who's got a religious belief can throw up the religion flag. And now if I don't profess a religion, I don't have the same flag to throw. Just give everybody the flag to throw that says, I don't want to do something.
Yes. Yeah.
That's my only thing.
I think that what you just shared is more of a clarification of where I didn't clarify that aspect of it. Yeah, I think you should have the right to say, I don't want to do that. Now the hard part is that it's one thing to say, hey, you can have that right. We're not going to throw you in jail. We're not going to take your political liberty away from you. But we can take your job away from you. So where do we get it to the point where someone's right to right is an interesting word, but when they have are we going to get to a point? Is it appropriate? Maybe it is, and that's a different. I think it's an important conversation. It's probably a different one, but how do we figure out that relationship about? Does your political liberty carry the same weight as your ability to retain a job that you already have? Right? And I'm in full support, and this is just my opinion, that if you're a private business owner, you get a whole lot more latitude. You should get a whole lot more latitude because it's your dollars on the line. Now, if you want to have some cockamamie, maybe you have a discriminatory policy within your operating policy. You know what? I don't think I'd want to work for a place like that, and I'd be an asset as an employee. So you're good. People that are good employees aren't going to want to work for you. So you're going to run yourself into the ground. To me, that's more like the natural law setting. It might take a little longer rather than the hand of the government coming in saying, no, you can't have this policy. But no, everybody has the right to be stupid. At least they should. Right?
We do a great job of it.
Yeah.
I would just, my thought process is take it more back to what I'll call zero.
Yeah.
Just make it a human. It's not political. It's not religion.
Right.
Make it a human right.
Yeah. Something
comes up, you should have the right to say, I want to do it or I don't want to do it.
Sure.
That's all.
Yeah. I like that.
I appreciate your time.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for the opportunity.
As always, thank you for listening or watching the episode. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out on social media or send me an email. The links are all in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're not already, please follow the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube. And if you would, please leave me a rating. Ratings do two things. You can tell me what I need to fix or improve, and the more ratings also gets the podcast recommended to more people. Another ask, please share the podcast with anyone you think could benefit from and enjoy it. And last, don't forget, sign up for the newsletter.